5,000 years ago, in the river valleys of southern Mesopotamia, people pressed strange wedge-shaped marks into wet clay and left behind some of the oldest written stories humanity possesses. These tablets spoke of gods who built cities, measured destinies, sent floods, chose kings, opened gates to the underworld, and shaped human beings for a purpose that was never entirely comforting. But they do not speak in the way modern people often expect. They do not hand us a neat doctrine. They do not say, in simple words, that the Anunnaki divided humanity into 7 bloodlines. That phrase belongs mostly to modern interpretation, speculation, and mystery traditions that grew around ancient Mesopotamian mythology much later. And yet, the reason the idea became so powerful is not difficult to understand, because when we enter the world of Sumer, we do find something strange. We find gods who assign roles. We find cities claimed by divine patrons. We find kingship descending from heaven. We find humans created to serve a cosmic order. We find priests, scribes, workers, rulers, and temple households arranged in systems that seemed not merely political, but sacred. And again, like a symbol carved into the dark, we find the number 7. 7 gates, 7 sages, 7 divine powers, 7 days in later sacred rhythms. 7 as a number of completion, danger, passage, purification, and cosmic structure. So the first mystery is not whether one tablet directly says, the Anunnaki created 7 bloodlines. It does not. The deeper mystery is why ancient Mesopotamian thought so often imagined existence as something divided, measured, assigned, ranked, and guarded by divine beings. What if the true secret is not a hidden genetic program, but an ancient worldview in which human identity itself was believed to be shaped from above? Picture the scene. The sun lowers over the plains of Sumer. The Euphrates moves slowly through fields of barley. In the distance, a ziggurat rises like a stairway of mud brick toward the sky. Inside the temple complex, scribes sit with reed styluses in their hands. They are not writing fantasy for entertainment. They are preserving hymns, economic accounts, royal inscriptions, rituals, myths, and sacred memory. To them, the world is not random. A city belongs to a god. A king rules because kingship has been granted. A name carries power. A ritual restores balance. A flood can be punishment. A dream can be warning. A star can be omen. A person is born into a world already filled with invisible arrangements. This is where the modern idea of bloodlines begins to find its emotional force, even when the literal claim goes beyond the tablets. Ancient people were intensely aware that birth mattered, family mattered, households mattered, temple service mattered, royal descent mattered. Certain families held offices. Certain names carried prestige. Certain cities claimed older divine favor than others. But was this social reality imagined as human invention or as part of a sacred design? That question opens a door into the oldest layers of recorded civilization. The Anunnaki are among the most mysterious divine groups in Mesopotamian tradition. Their identity shifts depending on period, language, and text. In some contexts, they are great gods. In others, they are associated with the underworld. Sometimes they appear as a collective of powerful divine beings who participate in cosmic decisions. They are not a single simple race with one fixed role in every tablet. They belong to a living mythological tradition that changed over centuries. This matters because modern stories often flatten them into one-idea ancient visitors, genetic engineers, rulers from another world, creators of secret bloodlines. That version is powerful for storytelling, but it is not the same thing as what the surviving Sumerian and Akkadian texts plainly state. The tablets give us something older, stranger, and in many ways more unsettling. They describe a universe where humanity is not the center. Humans are necessary, but not sovereign. They work, they build, they feed the gods through offerings, they maintain temples, they perform rituals, they support kingship. Their lives are woven into a divine economy. Could this be why later readers imagine the Anunnaki dividing humanity? Because the ancient world itself already appears divided, not by modern genetics, but by sacred function. The farmer, the ruler, the priest, the scribe, the laborer, the musician, the lamentation singer, the soldier, the temple administrator, the queen, the servant, the foreign captive, the royal heir. Each person occupied a place inside a world that seemed ordered by powers beyond ordinary human choice. And then there is the number 7. 7 has a peculiar gravity in Mesopotamian imagination. It appears in rituals, myths, incantations, and cosmic patterns. It can signal fullness, danger, transition, or sacred completeness. When Inanna descends to the underworld, she passes through 7 gates. At each gate, something is removed from her: crown, jewelry, garments, symbols of power. By the time she reaches the deepest realm, identity has been stripped away piece by piece. What kind of civilization imagines the soul's descent as a 7-fold unmaking? In another tradition, the 7 Apkallu, the sages before the flood, are remembered as bringers of civilization. They are linked with wisdom, ritual knowledge, and the ancient past. They stand at the border between myth and memory, between divine instruction and human culture. Later Mesopotamian traditions look back to them as figures who preserved knowledge from a time before catastrophe. 7 gates below, 7 sages before, 7 as passage, 7 as knowledge, 7 as a boundary between ordinary humanity and hidden order. It is easy to see how modern interpreters connect these patterns and imagine 7 original divisions of mankind. But the careful path is more fascinating than the careless one. The tablets do not need to say exactly what modern myth claims for them to reveal something profound. They show that ancient Mesopotamians believed human life was structured by unseen powers. The real question becomes, what did division mean to them? Was it punishment? Was it duty? Was it cosmic necessity? Was it a way to explain why some ruled and others served? Or was it a symbolic language for the many layers of human nature itself? Archaeology gives us clay tablets, city ruins, temple foundations, cylinder seals, burial sites, ration lists, royal monuments, and fragments of myth. It shows us a society of remarkable complexity. There were workers receiving grain, scribes recording transactions, rulers boasting of divine favor, priests maintaining sacred spaces, and cities competing under the protection of different gods. Myth gives us another layer. It tells us how that society imagined its place in the cosmos. Modern interpretation adds a third layer. It asks whether these ancient stories preserve symbolic truth, distorted history, spiritual memory, or something more mysterious. But these layers must not be confused. What ancient texts describe is a world ruled by gods and destiny. What archaeologists know is that Sumerian society was highly organized, temple-centered, and deeply hierarchical. What historians believe is that myths helped express and legitimize political, religious, and social order. What modern speculation suggests is that these divisions may hide a coded memory of origins, bloodlines, or intervention. The danger is pretending all 4 are the same. The mystery is that they are not, because once we separate them, something more subtle appears. The idea of 7 bloodlines may not be written openly on a tablet, but the fear behind it is ancient. The fear that humanity was never one simple family. The fear that people were born into invisible categories. The fear that rulers claimed heaven not only to govern bodies, but to define souls. And perhaps this is why the Anunnaki still haunt the modern imagination. They stand at the edge of the earliest written world, surrounded by clay fragments and broken temples, asking a question that has never disappeared. Who decided what humanity was meant to be? What kind of beings create humanity, and then immediately give humanity a task? In the oldest Mesopotamian imagination, human life does not begin with freedom in the modern sense. It begins with need. The gods require order. The land requires cultivation. The canals must be cleared. The fields must be watered. The temples must be supplied. The divine world, powerful as it is, still depends on a structure of service. This is one of the most startling ideas preserved in the creation traditions of Mesopotamia. Humans are not described as accidents. They are not described as equal partners of the gods. They are made because something in the cosmic system requires workers. This does not mean every ancient person understood the story in one literal way. Myths lived in temples, rituals, scribal schools, royal courts, and oral traditions. They were retold, reshaped, translated, and reinterpreted. But the underlying image is unforgettable. Humanity appears when divine beings need relief from labor. The question is disturbing. If humans were created to serve, who decided the form of that service? Imagine southern Mesopotamia before dawn. The air is cool. The reed marshes are still dark, and the first workers begin moving toward the fields. Water must be directed through canals before the heat rises. Mud brick walls need repair. Grain must be counted. Animals must be watched. Clay tablets must be marked by scribes who record what each person receives and what each household owes. In such a world, labor is not an abstract idea. It is survival. Without irrigation, crops fail. Without crops, temples empty. Without temples, the bond between city and God weakens. Without divine favor, the city itself feels exposed. This is the setting in which Mesopotamian creation stories become more than mythology. They echo the daily structure of life. A society built on organized labor imagined the universe itself as organized labor. Even the gods could be described through work, burden, delegation, and command. Some ancient texts describe lesser gods performing exhausting labor before humans are made. In later Akkadian traditions, the divine workers complain. Their burden becomes unbearable. A solution is proposed: create humans to carry the work instead. This is not a gentle beginning. It is a political beginning. It is an economic beginning. It is a religious beginning. Humanity enters the story as the answer to a problem among the gods. What if the first division of humanity was not blood at all, but function? The farmer produces food. The builder raises walls. The priest maintains offerings. The king protects the city. The scribe remembers the obligations. The artisan shapes sacred objects. The mourner performs laments. The soldier guards the border. Each role becomes part of a larger pattern, and that pattern is framed as necessary for cosmic balance. To modern ears, this can sound bleak. Yet to the ancient mind, order was not always oppression. Order was protection against chaos. The Mesopotamian world knew flood, drought, invasion, disease, famine, and sudden political collapse. Stability was fragile. When the canals held and the harvest came, life continued. When the king was strong and the temples functioned, the city felt aligned with heaven. But here lies the tension. A sacred order can comfort the vulnerable. It can also justify the powerful. If a ruler claims that kingship descends from heaven, resistance becomes dangerous not only politically, but spiritually. If a temple system claims divine authority over labor and offerings, social hierarchy becomes part of cosmic duty. If birth places someone into a household, trade, office, or obligation, that position can seem less like a human arrangement and more like destiny. This is where the mythic imagination begins to resemble the modern bloodline mystery, though not in the way popular claims often suggest. The tablets do not present a list of 7 genetic families. They reveal something more historically grounded and psychologically powerful. Human beings were classified within a sacred system. Their value, duty, and identity were shaped by their relationship to gods, temples, kings, cities, and households. Could ancient people have seen these divisions as divinely approved? The evidence of Mesopotamian culture suggests that they often did. Royal inscriptions speak with the confidence of divine appointment. Temple hymns praise cities as chosen places. Administrative tablets record vast networks of workers, rations, offerings, and property. Myths describe gods assigning destinies. Ritual texts attempt to restore balance when danger threatens. Omens interpret signs in the heavens, the body, the liver of a sacrificed animal, or the strange timing of an event. Nothing is merely random. Everything might be a message. Everything might reveal a hidden order. And if everything has a place, then every person might have one too. This raises an uncomfortable possibility. The ancient myth of human creation may have served 2 needs at once. On one level, it explained why people must work, suffer, build, and serve. On another level, it gave spiritual meaning to the very system that organized society. Labor was not just labor. It was participation in the maintenance of the world. The canal digger was not merely moving mud. The brewer was not merely making beer. The shepherd was not merely guarding animals. The singer was not merely performing music. Each task helped feed a civilization that believed gods and humans were bound together in a fragile exchange. Yet the exchange was unequal. The gods received offerings. Kings received legitimacy. Temples received wealth. Workers received rations, protection, and place. What happens when a society turns place into destiny? This is one of the deepest mysteries inside ancient civilization. The Sumerians built one of humanity's first urban worlds, but cities require classification. Someone must command. Someone must record. Someone must obey. Someone must inherit. Someone must be trained. Someone must be excluded. The mythic language of creation transforms this reality into sacred memory. It whispers that humanity was shaped with purpose, but purpose can be a chain as easily as a calling. In the modern imagination, the phrase 7 bloodlines suggests hidden families ruling from behind history. In the ancient Mesopotamian world, the more immediate reality was different. Power was visible in temples, palaces, fields, archives, and ritual calendars. Division was not hidden underground. It stood in the open, built from mud brick, sealed with cylinder impressions, and counted in barley. The unsettling part is not that ancient texts secretly reveal a complete bloodline doctrine. The unsettling part is that they reveal a civilization asking whether human inequality was written into the structure of existence. If humanity was created to carry a burden once held by gods, then the next question becomes impossible to avoid. Were all humans made for the same burden? Or were some marked from the beginning to command, while others served? Can a city be chosen before its people are even born? In the Sumerian imagination, humanity was not spread across the earth as one shapeless crowd. People belonged somewhere. They belonged to a city, a temple, a patron deity, a landscape of canals and walls, a sacred name that carried memory through generations. To live in Sumer was not simply to live on land. It was to live inside a divine geography. This may be one of the earliest and most overlooked forms of human division. Not bloodline in the modern sense, not race in the modern sense, not a secret genetic order hidden behind history. A sacred map. Each major city of southern Mesopotamia had its own divine identity. Ur was closely associated with Nana, the moon god. Uruk was linked with Inanna, the powerful goddess of love, war, kingship, and terrifying transformation. Eridu was connected with Enki, lord of wisdom, fresh water, magic, and hidden knowledge. Nippur held special status as the city of Enlil, one of the great gods of authority, wind, command, and destiny. This meant that a person's city was not merely an address, it was a spiritual affiliation. A city had a divine owner. A temple stood as that god's house. Festivals renewed the bond between heaven and earth. Priests, singers, craftsmen, workers, and officials served within the sacred economy. The fields surrounding the city helped support the god's household. The ruler governed under divine gaze. So what happens when entire populations begin to understand themselves through different gods? Picture an ancient map of Sumer, but not as a flat drawing on parchment. Imagine it at night from above, though no ancient eye could ever see it this way. The dark rivers twist through the plain. Around them glow scattered centers of life. Uruk, Ur, Lagash, Nippur, Kish, Eridu, Umma. Each city rises like an island of order surrounded by fields, marshes, desert edges, and dangerous roads. Inside each city, people know their gods' stories. They know the rituals of their temple. They know the pride of their walls. They know the rivalries with neighboring cities. They know which ruler claims divine support. They know where offerings must be carried. They know the names spoken in hymns. What if the earliest dividing of humanity in Sumer was not done in a hidden chamber, but through the building of sacred cities? The ancient texts often treat cities as more than political settlements. They can be beloved, abandoned, cursed, restored, praised, or mourned. City laments speak as though a destroyed city is a wounded living being. Hymns describe temples with awe, almost as cosmic structures. Royal inscriptions present building projects as acts that please the gods and stabilize the world. In this worldview, a city is not just made of mud brick. It is made of destiny. The temple sits at the center. Its raised platform, courtyards, storage rooms, workshops, and ritual spaces organize daily life. Smoke rises from offerings. Musicians perform sacred songs. Scribes record grain, wool, oil, beer, labor, land, and livestock. Workers receive rations. Officials seal tablets. People enter and leave under systems of obligation that are both practical and sacred. A modern observer might call this administration. An ancient worshipper might call it service to the god. Both are true, but neither alone captures the full mystery, because the temple did not only organize resources, it organized identity. The god of a city gave that city a place in the divine order. To belong to Uruk was not the same as belonging to Eridu. To serve Nana was not the same as serving Inanna. Different gods carried different powers, myths, symbols, rituals, and expectations. Here the idea of 7 bloodlines begins to transform. Instead of imagining 7 biological families, consider 7 sacred affiliations, 7 cities, 7 divine houses, 7 forms of service, 7 ways human beings could be placed under heavenly authority. The number 7 is not always attached to this exact city system in the tablets, but the symbolic habit is present throughout Mesopotamian thought. Ancient people often used number, place, and divine name to organize reality. Could later imagination have turned sacred geography into sacred ancestry? That is not difficult to imagine. Over time, city identity can become family identity. Family identity can become hereditary office. Hereditary office can become elite descent. Elite descent can become mythic origin. What begins as service to a city god can eventually be remembered as belonging to a chosen line. This is how human societies build memory. They begin with land. Then they attach land to gods. Then they attach gods to rulers. Then they attach rulers to ancestors. Then they attach ancestors to destiny. In Sumer, the city was the stage on which this process became visible. The rivalry between cities also matters. Ancient Mesopotamia was not a single peaceful kingdom for most of its early history. It was a landscape of city-states. They traded, fought, made alliances, dug canals, disputed boundaries, and competed for prestige. A ruler did not simply command Sumer as a unified nation in the modern sense. Power moved. Cities rose and fell. Sacred favor could appear to shift. Why would the gods choose one city, then allow another to dominate? Why would one temple flourish while another suffered? Why would a city praised in hymns later become a ruin under sand? These questions mattered because political events could be read as divine signals. Victory suggested favor. Defeat suggested anger, abandonment, or cosmic imbalance. A destroyed city was not only a military tragedy, it was a spiritual catastrophe. The god's house had been violated. The people's place in the sacred map had been shaken. Archaeology reveals the physical remains of this world temple platforms, city walls, foundation deposits, administrative tablets, seals, statues, and layers of rebuilding. Historians see patterns of urban growth, irrigation, competition, labor organization, and state formation. Ancient texts add the inner voice of the civilization itself. They show how people explained their cities not as accidents of settlement, but as places woven into divine intention. And this creates a new mystery. If the gods owned the cities, and the cities shaped the people, then humanity was divided by belonging. A person's life was framed by the divine presence attached to their place of birth, labor, worship, and loyalty. The city became a container of destiny. This does not prove a doctrine of 7 bloodlines. It reveals something more ancient and perhaps more powerful, the idea that human groups could be separated by sacred origin stories attached to land. A wall did not only keep enemies out, it held a divine identity within. A temple did not only receive offerings, it marked the center of a people's world. A city name did not only describe a location, it told a person who they were beneath the gaze of heaven. But if cities could be chosen, protected, or abandoned by gods, then the next mystery becomes sharper. What happened when the people inside those cities began to believe that power itself could descend through a chosen line? What if the most disturbing origin of humanity was not clay, but blood? In one of the most haunting creation traditions from ancient Mesopotamia, human beings are not shaped from earth alone. They are made from a mixture of clay and the life essence of a slain god. This account is better known from later Akkadian and Babylonian traditions rather than the earliest Sumerian texts, but it belongs to the same broad Mesopotamian world of myth, temple culture, divine hierarchy, and cosmic labor. The idea is unforgettable. A god is killed. His blood is used. Humanity is formed. And suddenly, human nature is no longer simple. If human beings carry something divine within them, then why are they still servants? If they are made from the substance of a god, why are they mortal? If their origin includes rebellion, sacrifice, and punishment, does that mean humanity was born carrying a hidden fracture? This is where the mystery of ancestry becomes darker. Modern stories about the Anunnaki often focus on bloodlines because blood feels like identity. Blood suggests inheritance. Blood suggests memory. Blood suggests something passed silently from one generation to another. But the ancient myth does not speak of blood in the modern genetic sense. It speaks through sacred symbolism. Blood is life. Blood is guilt. Blood is power. Blood is the trace of a divine being transformed into human existence. In the Akkadian poem often called Atrahasis, the gods grow weary of labor. The lower gods have carried the burden of digging and maintaining the world. Their complaint rises. The divine assembly seeks a solution. A god associated with intelligence or rebellion is selected, killed, and from his flesh and blood, mixed with clay. Humanity is created to bear the work. The scene is not peaceful creation. It is a ritual of transfer. The burden moves from gods to humans. The life of one divine being becomes the seed of mankind. What kind of creature is made from both earth and divine blood? The clay connects humanity to the ground. Clay was everywhere in Mesopotamia. Houses were built from it. Tablets were written on it. Bricks were shaped from it. Canals cut through it. Floods dissolved it. The people of Sumer and Akkad lived in a world where clay was not dead material. It was the substance of civilization itself. A tablet began as wet clay and became memory. A brick began as mud and became a temple wall. A figurine began as clay and became a ritual object. A human, in the mythic imagination, could begin as clay and become a worker, worshipper, mourner, ruler, or singer of hymns. But blood adds something clay does not have. Blood makes the human being dangerous. Because divine blood means humanity is not merely an object shaped by the gods. Humanity contains a trace of the divine conflict that made it possible. This is not a story about pure innocence. It is a story about a species born out of crisis. Could this be why Mesopotamian myths often treat human beings as necessary, noisy, fragile, rebellious, and dependent all at once? In some traditions, humans are created to relieve the gods. In flood stories, humans become too numerous or too loud, disturbing the divine order. In royal ideology, certain humans are lifted above others as kings favored by the gods. In rituals, humans must constantly maintain balance, appease powers, avert omens, and repair invisible danger. Humanity is useful, but unstable, sacred, but subordinate, divine in origin, but mortal in fate. This tension lies at the heart of the blood mystery. Historians usually read the blood and clay motif as mythological theology, not biological history. It explains the human condition through symbols that ancient audiences could understand. Clay explains mortality, labor, and earthly existence. Divine blood explains consciousness, ritual obligation, and perhaps the restless intelligence that separates humans from animals. The slain god explains why human life is bound to conflict from the beginning. Modern interpretations often take a different path. They ask whether the myth preserves a memory of intervention, hybrid origins, or elite descent. These ideas can be compelling in mystery storytelling, but they go beyond what the ancient texts securely state. The tablets describe divine creation through mythic language. They do not provide a scientific account of engineered bloodlines, yet the myth still raises a strange question. If all humanity was made from the blood of one sacrificed god, why did ancient society become so divided? One answer is that shared origin does not erase assigned destiny. A society can believe all humans are created from the same material while still believing different people have different roles. The farmer and king may both be clay and divine blood, but the king stands beneath a special destiny. The priest and laborer may share mortality, but the priest enters spaces the laborer cannot. The scribe and soldier may both serve the city, but one controls memory while the other controls violence. Creation gives humanity a common substance. Civilization gives humanity unequal places. This is where the bloodline idea becomes psychologically powerful. People look at ancient hierarchy and ask, did they believe some human beings carried a different kind of divine inheritance? The answer depends on the text and period. Mesopotamian kings often claimed divine favor, divine selection, or special birth narratives. Some were described in elevated language that set them apart from ordinary people. But this is not the same as a clear doctrine of 7 biological lineages created by the Anunnaki. The distinction matters. What ancient texts describe is divine substance used in human creation. What archaeology reveals is a society with structured ranks, offices, labor systems, and elite households. What historians often believe is that myths gave meaning to social order and human obligation. What modern speculation suggests is that divine blood may hide a memory of separate origins or chosen lineages. The tablet gives us the symbol. The modern mind builds the secret. Still, symbols can survive because they touch something ancient in human fear. Many cultures have wondered why humans feel divided within themselves. Why do we desire the heavens but return to dust? Why do we create temples and wars with the same hands? Why do we seek wisdom but repeat violence? Why do we build civilizations that can collapse into ruin? The blood of the rebel god offers one mythic answer. Human beings are made from contradiction. Earth pulls them downward. Divine essence pulls them upward. Labor binds them to survival. Memory opens them to eternity. Death waits for them, yet they dream of gods. In this light, the bloodline mystery may be less about 7 hidden families and more about a fractured inheritance inside every human being. The divine element is not limited to a dynasty. It is buried within the human condition itself, mixed with clay, sealed in mortality, awakened by longing. But the myth also leaves a dangerous possibility hanging in the air. If human beings were created from divine blood to carry the burdens of heaven, who decided which humans would carry the heaviest burden and which would claim the right to rule over the rest? Who owns destiny when destiny can be written, stolen, guarded, or taken? In the ancient Mesopotamian world, fate wasn't always imagined as a vague feeling or invisible possibility. It could be pictured as something almost official, almost legal, almost administrative. The same civilization that recorded grain rations, temple offerings, labor assignments, fields, animals, debts, and royal victories also imagined divine power as something that could be fixed, declared, and confirmed. Destiny had the feeling of a decree, and in myth, a decree could change the shape of the world. This is one of the most important ideas behind Mesopotamian religion. The gods do not simply exist. They command, they assign, they establish boundaries, they decide roles, they determine the order of heaven, earth, city, temple, kingship, and human obligation. A person's life unfolds inside a universe where power comes from decision, and decision comes from beings greater than humanity. So the question becomes deeply unsettling. Was human identity believed to be chosen from within or assigned from above? In several Mesopotamian traditions, divine authority is connected to tablets, decrees, names, and cosmic offices. The famous idea of the Tablet of Destinies appears most clearly in Akkadian and Babylonian mythic material. It is not a simple book of personal futures. It is a symbol of cosmic command. Whoever possesses such authority can confirm order, control legitimacy, and stand at the center of divine rule. This image matters because Mesopotamia was a writing civilization. Writing was not decoration. Writing controlled reality. A field recorded on a tablet could belong to someone. A ration recorded on a tablet could feed a worker. A seal pressed into clay could validate a transaction. A royal inscription carved into stone could proclaim a king's relationship with the gods. A name written properly could preserve memory. A curse written in a foundation text could threaten anyone who destroyed a monument. To write was to stabilize. To write was to bind. To write was to make a claim against forgetting. No wonder destiny itself could be imagined in written form. Picture a dim chamber in a temple archive. Shelves or baskets hold clay tablets marked with thousands of small impressions. Some are dry and hardened. Some are still soft. A scribe lifts one carefully, reading numbers, names, deliveries, dates, witnesses. Nothing about the room looks supernatural. Yet the principle is astonishing. Human lives are being organized through marks on clay. Who worked? Who received? Who owed? Who belonged? Who was counted? Who disappeared from the record? Now imagine that same administrative imagination raised into heaven. The gods have their own order. Their decrees establish what is permitted, forbidden, elevated, humbled, remembered, or erased. Cosmic power begins to resemble a divine archive. This does not mean the ancient texts teach a modern conspiracy of hidden bloodline registries. They do not, but they do show a world where classification was sacred. The divine assembly could decide. The king could receive authority. The temple could record obligation. The scribe could preserve hierarchy. The written word could outlive the body. What if the deepest form of division was not physical ancestry, but recorded destiny? In myth, the possession of destiny is dangerous. A being who holds the symbols of cosmic authority becomes more than strong. He becomes legitimate. This is why stories involving divine decrees often circle around conflict. Power must be guarded because the universe depends on proper order. If the wrong being gains command, chaos may follow. This reflects a central fear of ancient society. Not merely that enemies might invade, not merely that crops might fail, but that order itself might fall into the wrong hands. The same fear appears in human politics. A king needs legitimacy. A ruler who cannot show divine favor is vulnerable. Cities compete not only for land, but for sacred prestige. Temples preserve the claim that their god, their ritual, their city, and their ruler stand in correct relation to heaven. Could this be why ancient kings cared so much about inscriptions? They did not simply want future people to know their names. They wanted their names fixed within sacred memory. They restored temples, dedicated statues, built walls, dug canals, and recorded these acts as service to the gods. Their monuments often speak as though the king has been chosen, strengthened, instructed, or beloved by divine powers. A modern reader sees propaganda. An ancient audience may have seen proof of alignment. Both readings can exist together. The mystery begins when divine destiny becomes hereditary. If a ruler is chosen by the gods, What about his son? If a family guards a priestly office, what about the next generation? If a temple household preserves sacred knowledge, who is allowed to learn it? If a scribe's training passes through elite circles, who controls memory? Destiny starts as divine command. Then it becomes institution. Then it becomes inheritance. Then it begins to look like bloodline. This is where the modern claim of Anunnaki bloodlines gains its emotional force, even without direct textual proof. Ancient Mesopotamian culture truly did connect authority with divine decree. It truly did preserve elite families, royal houses, temple personnel, and scribal traditions. It truly did imagine cosmic order as assigned and guarded. But the leap from these facts to a precise system of 7 genetic lineages is a modern construction. The ancient evidence points to something more layered. What the texts describe is a universe governed by decrees. What archaeology reveals is a society organized through temples, palaces, records, and offices. What historians believe is that divine destiny language helped legitimize political and social power. What modern interpretation suggests is that myths of divine decree may encode memories of chosen lines, sacred families, or hidden hierarchies. The difference between these layers is not a weakness. It is the path into the mystery. Because the idea of the Tablet of Destinies reveals something profound about human civilization. People have always feared that their lives might be written by forces they cannot see. A birth record, a family name, a royal decree, a temple obligation, a debt tablet, a divine omen, a star at the wrong hour. A god's decision spoken in a myth older than memory. In Mesopotamia, destiny was not merely personal. It was cosmic. A person did not ask only, "What do I want to become?" They lived inside a culture that asked, "What has been assigned?" That question can create order. It can also create captivity. The farmer may accept the field because the world needs grain. The priest may guard the ritual because the god must be honored. The king may claim the throne because heaven has chosen him. The scribe may hold knowledge because writing belongs to trained hands. The servant may remain unnamed because the tablet records only what the system needs. And somewhere above all of them, myth imagines decrees that fix the shape of existence. The modern mind hears this and wonders whether ancient texts are hiding a more literal secret. Were certain families believed to carry divine authorization? Were social ranks reflections of cosmic categories? Were rulers presenting political inheritance as sacred destiny? These questions do not require invented tablets. They arise naturally from the evidence that exists. The disturbing possibility is not that the Anunnaki secretly wrote a list of 7 bloodlines in a lost archive. The disturbing possibility is that civilization itself learned to turn divine order into human hierarchy. Once destiny can be written, someone must hold the stylus. Once authority can descend, someone must claim to receive it. Once the gods are imagined as assigning places, every human division can be made to feel eternal. But if destiny could be possessed, guarded, or transferred, then one question remains like a sealed tablet buried beneath a ruined temple. Who first taught humanity that power belongs to those whose names are written in heaven? Why would ancient tradition remember 7 beings who appeared before the flood and brought knowledge to humanity? Among the most mysterious figures in Mesopotamian lore are the Apkallu, often described as sages, wise ones, or culture bringers. From a world older than the catastrophe that nearly erased mankind, they do not appear as ordinary teachers. They stand in a strange twilight between divine and human, between myth and ritual, between memory and symbol. In later Mesopotamian tradition, these 7 sages are connected with the age before the flood. They are associated with wisdom, crafts, ritual knowledge, purification, and the ordering of civilization. Some traditions describe them as linked to great cities and early kings. In art and ritual imagery, Apkallu figures can appear in forms that are not fully human, including beings with fish-like cloaks or bird-like features, depending on the period and context. This is not the simple picture of secret bloodlines that modern speculation often imagines. It is stranger. It suggests that civilization itself was remembered as an inheritance from beings who crossed a boundary ordinary humans could not cross. What kind of knowledge would be so important that later generations remembered its bearers as 7 sages from before the flood? Imagine a temple wall in an Assyrian palace centuries after the earliest Sumerian cities had risen from the marshlands. Carved figures stand in solemn profile. Some hold a small bucket and a cone-shaped object, often interpreted in ritual contexts as connected with purification. Their faces are calm, their bodies powerful, their posture formal. They are not chaotic monsters. They are guardians of order. To the modern eye, they may look like supernatural attendants. To ancient viewers, they may have signaled protection, wisdom, and sacred power. The Apkallu are not identical to the Anunnaki. They belong to a different category of Mesopotamian supernatural tradition. Yet their importance to the bloodline mystery is enormous, because they introduce one of the most famous 7-fold patterns connected to human civilization. Not 7 families, but 7 wise figures. Not 7 genetic lines, but 7 bearers of knowledge. Not 7 tribes of humanity, but 7 channels through which culture itself enters the human world. Could later imagination have confused wisdom lines with bloodlines? That possibility is worth considering. Knowledge in ancient Mesopotamia was not open to everyone equally. Writing required training. Ritual required instruction. Temple service required inherited systems of practice. Divination, incantation, lamentation, astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and sacred recitation belonged to specialized circles. A society can divide people not only by birth, but by access to knowledge. And knowledge can be inherited. A scribe teaches a son. A priestly family preserves ritual. A court scholar serves a king. A temple office passes through trusted hands. A tradition becomes a lineage, not always because of blood alone, but because memory needs guardians. The Apkallu myth gives that process cosmic depth. It imagines that the earliest foundations of civilization did not arise merely from human trial and error. They were given, taught, revealed, or transmitted from a higher realm. This does not mean archaeologists treat the Apkallu as historical individuals in the modern sense. Archaeology studies the growth of cities, writing, irrigation, administration, craft specialization, trade, and political power through material evidence. The Apkallu belong to the mythic and religious way Mesopotamians explained the sacred origin of culture. Yet myths are not meaningless because they are myths. They reveal what a civilization believed was precious. And in the case of the 7 sages, what was precious was knowledge. Not gold, not armies, not blood purity, knowledge. The ability to build, purify, calculate, heal, interpret omens, perform rituals, advise kings, protect temples, and keep chaos away from the human world. What if the real 7-fold division was between those who carried knowledge and those who depended on it? This idea cuts deeper than modern fantasy. In every early civilization, specialized knowledge created power. The person who could read a tablet could see obligations others could not challenge. The person who could interpret an omen could influence a royal decision. The person who knew the correct ritual words could stand between a frightened community and invisible danger. The person who knew the calendar could determine when festivals, plantings, offerings, and ceremonies should occur. Knowledge made society function. Knowledge also created distance. A farmer might know the soil better than any priest, but the priest knew the ritual calendar. A laborer might build the temple wall, but the scribe recorded the labor. A king might command armies, but scholars interpreted whether the gods favored the campaign. Power did not live in one place. It moved through networks of expertise. The 7 sages symbolize this hidden architecture of civilization. They are remembered as beings who bring order from a time older than the known world. Their pre-flood setting matters. In Mesopotamian thought, the flood is not simply a disaster, it is a boundary. It divides primordial time from historical time. It separates an age of legendary kings and divine closeness from the more familiar world of mortal rulers, ruined cities, and fragile memory. Anything placed before the flood becomes charged with mystery. It belongs to the lost beginning. It suggests a knowledge almost erased. It invites the question, what survived? The story of 7 sages gives a possible answer. Wisdom survived through transmission. Ritual survived through guarded practice. Kingship survived through divine sanction. Writing survived through scribal hands. City life survived because someone remembered how to restore order after catastrophe. Modern interpretations sometimes transform this into a claim that 7 original bloodlines survived the flood, each preserving a different fragment of divine inheritance. The ancient materials do not state this as a clear doctrine, but they do preserve a powerful pattern. 7 figures linked with knowledge from a vanished age, remembered as culture bringers whose influence reaches into later civilization. That is why the Apkallu matter. They show that the number 7 could mark not only sacred completion, but the preservation of civilization itself. A 7-fold group stands between chaos and order. A 7-fold memory survives catastrophe. A 7-fold wisdom passes from the unreachable past into the human present. Here, the bloodline mystery becomes a knowledge mystery. Perhaps ancient people feared less that special families possessed unusual blood, and more that certain circles possessed unusual access. Access to writing, access to ritual, access to divine names, access to the king, access to the stories that explained why society had to be arranged in a particular way. Who controls the oldest knowledge controls the meaning of human origins. And if a group can claim that its wisdom came from before the flood, then its authority no longer seems merely human. It becomes ancient beyond challenge, sacred beyond ordinary memory, rooted in a time when gods and sages still walked near the foundations of the world. This is why the 7 sages remain so haunting. They do not give us a simple answer. They offer a pattern knowledge descends, catastrophe interrupts, chosen keepers preserve. Civilization begins again. But if the 7 sages carried the wisdom of the world before the flood, then what was so dangerous, or so sacred, that only a few were allowed to remember it? What kind of flood destroys the world, but leaves behind a question more powerful than the waters themselves? In Mesopotamian tradition, the flood is not only a story of rain, rivers, and survival. It is a wound in memory. It divides the world into 2 ages, the time before catastrophe, and the time that had to begin again. Cities, kings, sages, rituals, and human destiny all become more mysterious once the flood enters the story. Because catastrophe changes the meaning of everything that survives. A flood does not merely kill, it selects. It erases most names and preserves a few. It buries cities and leaves fragments. It turns ordinary memory into sacred inheritance. This is why flood traditions became so powerful across Mesopotamia. In Sumerian and Akkadian literature, the flood appears in more than one form and in more than one textual tradition. The Sumerian flood story includes the figure Ziusudra, a king who survives divine destruction. The Akkadian Atrahasis tradition tells of a human warned by a god to build a boat. The later Babylonian epic of Gilgamesh preserves the famous account of Utnapishtim, who tells Gilgamesh how he survived the great deluge and received a destiny unlike ordinary mortals. The names change, the shape of the tale changes, but the central terror remains. Humanity almost disappears. What could make the gods decide that mankind had become unbearable? In some Mesopotamian accounts, the reason is not moral corruption in the later religious sense. It is noise, overpopulation, disturbance, imbalance. Humanity, created to carry labor, multiplies beyond control. The sound of human life rises toward the gods. Sleep is disrupted. Order is threatened. The solution chosen by the divine assembly is devastating. The flood comes as a reset. Imagine the sky darkening over the flat lands of Mesopotamia, winds gathering, rivers swelling, canals overflowing, mud brick walls softening under relentless water, storerooms collapsing, grain dissolving, livestock swept away, temples standing like islands, then failing, people climbing rooftops, calling out into rain that does not stop. For a civilization built around irrigation, water was life, but too much water was uncreation. The same force that fed fields could return the world to chaos. This is the terrible beauty of the flood myth. It transforms the environment of Mesopotamia into a cosmic drama. The rivers that made civilization possible also reminded people how fragile civilization was. A canal breach, a storm, a river shift, or a failed harvest could become more than weather. It could feel like a message from powers beyond the human world. Archaeology does not confirm one single global flood that destroyed all humanity. It does show that Mesopotamian cities experienced local flooding at different times, and that flood deposits appear in some ancient sites. Historians generally understand the flood stories as mythic traditions shaped by real environmental danger, cultural memory, and religious imagination. What ancient texts describe is divine catastrophe. What archaeology studies is sediment, settlement, destruction layers, rebuilding, and regional patterns of river life. But the myth asks a question that archaeology alone cannot answer. What does survival mean when survival is granted by a god? Ziusudra, Atrahasis, and Utnapishtim are not ordinary survivors who simply get lucky. They are warned. They obey instructions. They build. They preserve life. They cross from one age into another, carrying memory that everyone else loses. This makes them more than characters. They become bridges. A bridge between the drowned world and the renewed world. A bridge between divine secrecy and human knowledge. A bridge between destruction and lineage. Here, the modern bloodline mystery finds one of its strongest emotional roots. After any great catastrophe, survivors matter in a new way. Their families become the source of future generations. Their memories become sacred. Their obedience becomes proof of selection. Their story becomes a charter for why the world after disaster is arranged as it is. If only a few survive, then all later humanity comes through a narrow gate. Could ancient people have imagined social divisions as descending from those who survived catastrophe? The surviving texts do not present a clear doctrine of 7 flood bloodlines. They do not list 7 post-flood families created by the Anunnaki. Yet the flood myth creates the perfect structure for such later interpretation. A world is erased. A chosen figure survives. Knowledge is carried across the waters. life begins again under divine terms. This is how memory becomes lineage, not necessarily through secret genetics, but through sacred survival. The one who survives carries more than blood. He carries instruction, ritual, warning, and divine favor. His descendants are not merely children. They are heirs of an interrupted world. Every later city, ruler, offering, and field exists under the shadow of the flood. And there is another disturbing element. The gods disagree. In some flood traditions, one god helps humanity while others support destruction. Enki, or Ea in Akkadian tradition, often appears as the clever divine figure who preserves life by warning the chosen survivor. This creates a tension inside the divine world itself. The gods are not always united in their attitude toward humanity. Some are angered by human existence. One protects it. The survival of mankind depends on divine conflict. What if humanity exists because not all gods agreed we should continue? That question gives the flood story its psychological force. Humans are not saved because they are powerful. They are saved because a hidden warning reaches one person. The future depends on listening, building, sealing the boat, gathering life, and trusting a message that most people never hear. The flood is therefore not only destruction, it is a test of reception. Who hears the warning? Who obeys? Who is allowed to carry the world forward? In later cultures, flood stories often become moral, covenantal, cosmic, or ancestral. In Mesopotamia, the flood carries a particular sadness. Even survival is not simple. Utnapishtim becomes distant from ordinary humanity. Gilgamesh seeks him because he wants the secret of escaping death. But what he finds is not easy comfort. The flood survivor possesses knowledge, yet his condition separates him from the normal human world. To survive the flood is to become marked, not just alive. Different? This may be the deepest root of the bloodline idea, the belief that some people stand closer to the lost beginning because their memory passed through catastrophe intact. The flood creates two kinds of humanity in the imagination: those swallowed by forgetting, and those who inherit the story. But if the flood reset mankind, why did inequality return so quickly in the sacred memory of Mesopotamia? Why did kingship, temple power, divine selection, and ranked society rise again from the mud? Perhaps the flood did not erase the old order. Perhaps it purified it, narrowed it, and made it even more sacred. And if only certain knowledge crossed the waters, who decided which fragments of the drowned world humanity was allowed to keep? What does it mean for kingship to descend from heaven? Not a king, not a dynasty, not a palace, kingship itself. In the Sumerian king list, one of the most famous and puzzling compositions from ancient Mesopotamia, rule is described as something that came down from above. The idea is simple on the surface, but enormous in its implications. Authority is not merely seized by force, inherited by blood, or negotiated among people. It arrives from the divine realm as a sacred institution. This is one of the clearest ancient foundations for the later mystery of chosen bloodlines. Because once kingship comes from heaven, the ruler is no longer just a powerful man. He becomes the visible holder of an invisible order. The Sumerian king list presents a sequence of cities and rulers, placing kingship in different locations across time. It includes astonishingly long reigns for some early kings, especially in the period placed before the flood. These numbers are not treated by historians as ordinary chronological records in the modern sense. They belong to a literary and ideological tradition, one that organizes the past into a sacred pattern of rule, city prestige, and divine transfer. But the central message is unmistakable. Power moves. Heaven grants it. Cities receive it. Kings embody it. And when a city loses it, history itself changes direction. Imagine a clay tablet in a scribal school. A young student copies lines about ancient kings whose reigns stretch into impossible lengths. The names are old, some almost dreamlike. Cities appear one after another. Eridu, Bad Tabira, Larak, Sippar, Shuruppak. Then the flood. Then kingship descends again. The student presses each sign carefully, not merely learning history, but absorbing a worldview. Rule is not random. Cities rise because destiny has entered them. Cities fall because destiny has departed. A king stands at the center because divine order has selected him. This is not the same as saying every king was believed to be a god. Mesopotamian kingship changed across periods and regions. Some rulers were divinized in particular contexts, while many were presented as chosen servants, shepherds, builders, warriors, or caretakers under divine authority. But even when the king was not a god, his office was sacred. He maintained temples. He restored canals. He defended the land. He offered justice. He built walls. He performed rituals. He linked human society to divine expectation. What if royal blood mattered because it seemed to carry the right to receive heavenly authority? Here the concept of bloodline becomes more historically grounded. Royal families did matter. Succession mattered. Genealogy mattered. A ruler's father, city, patron deity, and building works could all support his claim. But the ancient evidence does not show a hidden system of 7 Anunnaki bloodlines. It shows something equally powerful: kingship as a sacred office that could attach itself to certain cities and dynasties, making political control appear woven into cosmic order. The king list is especially fascinating because it does not keep kingship in one city forever. It moves from city to city. This movement creates a political theology of change. If one city dominates, the list can portray that dominance as part of a divine sequence. If another city rises, kingship has shifted. This is not just history. It is legitimacy written backward into time. A modern reader may ask, is this propaganda? In part, yes. It can function that way. But it is not only propaganda in the shallow sense. It is a profound attempt to explain why power changes hands. The ancient world was unstable. City-states fought. Dynasties collapsed. Foreign rulers entered the land. Temples were damaged and restored. Famines and floods shook confidence. If power were merely human, then history might seem chaotic. If kingship descended and transferred according to divine order, then even upheaval could be placed inside meaning. This gave kingship a terrifying strength. A ruler could say, "I hold power because heaven has placed it here," and many people might believe him, not because they were foolish, but because their entire world was structured around divine order. The temple at the city center, the offerings, the festivals, the omens, the inscriptions, the royal statues, the scribal records, all of these reinforced the same invisible architecture. Power was not only exercised, power was narrated, power was ritualized, power was remembered. This is where kingship becomes a machine for turning ancestry into destiny. A king does not stand alone. He has a house. His sons inherit claims. His daughters may become priestesses or diplomatic figures. His ancestors can be honored. His inscriptions can invoke the gods who chose him. His victories can be framed as divine support. His building projects can demonstrate sacred responsibility. Over time, a dynasty can begin to feel less like a family that gained power and more like a line through which heaven prefers to act. That is the emotional seed of bloodline mythology. Not because a tablet names 7 hidden families, but because ancient kingship trains the imagination to believe that authority can run through selected human lines. Could some families have believed themselves closer to the gods than others? Royal ideology often encouraged exactly that feeling. A king might be described as beloved by a deity, chosen in the womb, granted strength, given wisdom, or appointed to shepherd the people. Such language does not need to be literal genetics to become socially real. Once a population accepts that one family is favored by heaven, the family's blood becomes symbolically charged. The body of the ruler becomes political theology. His birth matters. His name matters. His father matters. His city matters. His ritual purity matters. His ability to produce an heir matters. The palace becomes more than a residence. It becomes the earthly chamber of succession. The royal child becomes more than a child. He becomes a possible vessel for heaven's continuing decision. The queen becomes more than a wife. She becomes part of the sacred machinery of legitimacy. And yet the king list also contains a warning. No city keeps kingship forever. The sacred institution descends, settles, moves, vanishes, and descends again elsewhere. This means divine favor is powerful, but not permanently guaranteed. A bloodline can claim heaven, but history can contradict it. A city can boast of its god, but another army can break its gate. A king can carve his name into stone, but sand can cover the inscription. The same tradition that sanctifies power also reminds rulers that power is transferable. This makes Mesopotamian kingship both majestic and unstable. The king is chosen, but replaceable. The dynasty is sacred, but vulnerable. The city is favored, but mortal. The throne descends from heaven, but heaven may choose another place. In this light, the mystery of divided humanity becomes sharper. If kingship is a heavenly institution, then society is not divided only by occupation or city. It is divided by access to divine authority. Some people build the temple. Some people enter the temple. Some people serve the palace. One person sits on the throne and becomes the point where divine decree touches human command. The distance between ruler and worker becomes cosmic. This does not prove that the Anunnaki divided mankind into 7 literal bloodlines, but it reveals why such an idea feels believable to modern minds. Ancient Mesopotamia gave humanity one of its earliest written images of power descending from above and attaching itself to selected people. Once that image exists, every later mystery about divine ancestry has fertile ground. The oldest tablets do not need to hide a secret. They reveal the mechanism openly. Authority becomes sacred. Sacred authority becomes hereditary. Hereditary authority becomes blood memory. Blood memory becomes myth. And myth, once believed, can govern the living more powerfully than walls, weapons, or laws. The question is not whether kings claimed power. The question is why people accepted that power could fall from heaven into one human line. And if kingship truly descended from above in the ancient imagination, who stood closest to the gods, the ruler who wore the crown, or the hidden hands that taught him how to rule? Can a name hold a person's fate? In ancient Mesopotamia, a name was not treated as a casual label. It was not merely a sound used to call someone across a courtyard or record them on a tablet. A name carried identity, memory, rank, belonging, and sometimes even protection. To name something was to recognize it. To erase a name was to threaten its existence in memory. To rename a city, a king, a temple, or a child could signal a change in destiny. This is a quiet mystery, but it may be one of the most powerful, because if names shape identity, then division does not need to begin with blood. It can begin with language. A newborn in Mesopotamia did not enter an empty world. The child entered a web of family names, divine names, city names, royal names, occupational titles, household affiliations, and ancestral memory. Some names honored gods, some expressed gratitude, some asked for protection, some marked a relationship between the child and a divine power. A person could carry within their name a sentence, a prayer, a hope, or a claim. The name could say, "The God has given." It could say, "The goddess protects." It could say, "The king is strong." It could say, "Life has returned." To modern ears, this may seem poetic. To ancient people, it could be much more serious. A name placed a human life inside a sacred conversation. Imagine a scribe sitting in a temple archive, reading a list of names pressed into clay. The tablet may look ordinary. It may record rations of barley, oil, wool, or beer. But each name is a human presence captured by writing. One worker receives a measure of grain. One woman belongs to a weaving group. One official seals a transaction. One priest appears beside a temple office. One royal servant is identified by title. One person is counted, while another remains invisible because the record did not preserve them. The clay does not only remember resources, it remembers people according to the system that needed them. This is where naming becomes power. Who gets recorded by personal name? Who is known only by occupation? Who is linked to a father? Who is linked to a master? Who is linked to a god? Who is remembered as king? Who disappears as a number? In a society built on writing, names were not equal. A king's name could be carved into stone, placed in foundation deposits, repeated in inscriptions, attached to temples, and remembered by scribes long after his death. A laborer's name might appear once on a ration tablet and vanish forever. A god's name could stand at the center of a city's identity. A defeated enemy's name might be cursed, mocked, or omitted. The difference between being named and being forgotten was enormous. What if one of the earliest divisions of humanity was the division between those whose names were preserved and those whose names were consumed by time? Mesopotamian religion also gave divine names tremendous force. Gods were not abstract principles without personality. They had names, epithets, temples, cities, symbols, powers, families, stories, and rituals. Enki was not simply wisdom as an idea. Inanna was not simply love or war as a concept. Enlil was not merely wind or command. Their names carried histories. Their names summoned relationships. Their names located divine power in narrative and worship. To know a god's name was to approach a presence. To invoke a name in ritual was not the same as speaking ordinary speech. Words could protect. Words could curse. Words could heal. Words could bind. Words could restore. This is why incantations, hymns, laments, and ritual formulas mattered so deeply. The correct words, spoken in the correct way, at the correct time, by the correct person, could participate in maintaining order. Language was not passive. It acted. Could sacred speech divide humanity into those allowed to speak and those required only to listen? This question reaches into the heart of temple culture. Not everyone had equal access to the same words. Specialized rituals belonged to trained experts. Scribal learning required years of discipline. Hymns and liturgies lived in institutions. Royal inscriptions gave kings a voice larger than ordinary life. Law, administration, and memory depended on people who knew how to write. Literacy itself became a boundary. The scribe did not merely record society. The scribe helped create the categories through which society could see itself. A name written on a tablet could define obligation. A title could define rank. A seal could authenticate authority. A royal name could dominate public memory. A divine name could sanctify a political claim. The written signs became a gate through which identity passed into permanence. This gives a new angle to the mystery of bloodlines. Blood may carry ancestry, but names carry recognized ancestry. A family line without preserved names dissolves into silence. A royal house with recorded names can extend itself backward into sacred time. A priestly family with titles can maintain status across generations. A city with a divine name can claim ancient favor. The power is not only in descent, it is in remembered descent. A bloodline hidden from language is almost nothing in history. A name written, repeated, and ritualized can become destiny. This is why kings cared so deeply about the preservation of their names. To damage a statue, erase an inscription, or remove a name was not just vandalism. It was an attack on memory, legitimacy, and afterlife presence in the human world. The ruler wanted future generations to speak of him, not as a dead body, but as a name still alive inside the city's story. And yet, naming also concealed. A title can hide the individual, a category can replace the person, a worker can become the miller, the shepherd, the slave girl, the temple woman, the son of, the property of, the servant of. The system remembers enough to use someone, but not enough to preserve their full humanity. There is a deep sadness in that. Ancient tablets give us countless names, but most of the people behind them remain unreachable. We see the mark, not the face. We see the ration, not the dream. We see the office, not the inner life. We see the system's memory, not the soul's complete story. Modern interpretations of Anunnaki bloodlines often imagine secret names of ruling families, hidden genealogies, codes preserved by elites. Ancient Mesopotamia does not need that invention to be mysterious. It already shows that names were tools of sacred and social reality. The human world was divided by who could name, who could be named, and whose name would endure. What ancient texts describe is the power of divine and royal names in shaping identity. What archaeology reveals is a civilization where written names organized labor, property, temple life, and authority. What historians believe is that naming helped preserve hierarchy, legitimacy, and cultural memory. What modern interpretation suggests is that names may have functioned like symbolic bloodlines, connecting people to gods, cities, offices, and inherited status. A name can become a chain. A name can become a shield. A name can become a throne. A name can become a prayer carried into the dark. Perhaps this is why the mystery of human division cannot be solved only by looking for blood. The older question is more subtle: who had the power to define what a person was? If names could bind human beings to gods, cities, families, and destinies, then what happened to those whose names were never meant to survive? Who truly ruled ancient Mesopotamia, the king on the throne, the god in the temple, or the families who stood between them? In the popular imagination, ancient power often appears simple. A king commands, people obey, temples shine in the background, and gods hover above the story like distant symbols. But the real world of Sumer and later Mesopotamia was far more intricate. Power moved through households, priestly offices, scribal schools, temple workshops, royal courts, storage rooms, marriages, inheritances, and rituals repeated year after year until they seemed older than memory itself. This is where the mystery of human division becomes practical. Not hidden in the sky, not buried in a secret chamber, written into the daily machinery of civilization. Ancient temples were not only places of worship, they were economic centers, administrative centers, social centers, and symbolic centers. A major temple could own land, manage workers, receive offerings, store goods, sponsor crafts, employ singers, support priests, and participate in the political life of the city. The temple was the house of the god, but that divine house needed human hands to function. Someone prepared offerings. Someone cleaned ritual spaces. Someone sang laments. Someone brewed beer. Someone baked bread. Someone received sheep. Someone recorded wool. Someone guarded storerooms. Someone interpreted the calendar. Someone controlled access. Every one of these roles created rank. Some people entered inner spaces. Others remained outside. Some touched sacred objects. Others carried heavy loads. Some spoke divine names in ritual. Others produced the food consumed in offerings. Some families became attached to offices that carried prestige across generations. Others appear in records only as workers receiving rations. So when modern stories speak of bloodlines, they are often reaching for a real ancient pattern, even if they explain it too literally. There were indeed inherited roles. There were elite families. There were priestly circles. There were royal households. There were scribal traditions that did not belong equally to everyone. Social position could pass through family lines, not because tablets describe 7 secret Anunnaki races, but because early civilization itself tended to preserve power inside controlled networks. Could sacred service become hereditary privilege? The evidence of temple society strongly suggests that it could. Imagine a young boy born into a family of scribes. He does not begin life like a field laborer's son. His world contains tablets, signs, training, discipline, and access to institutions. He learns how to write names, numbers, offerings, contracts, hymns, and royal claims. His hand becomes useful to power. He can enter archives. He can preserve memory. He can read what others cannot. Now imagine a girl born into an elite household, chosen for a religious office connected with a major temple. Her life may be shaped by ritual expectation, family strategy, property, sacred status, and political alliance. Her body, name, and role may become part of the city's relationship with its god. Now imagine a worker born into dependence on temple rations. His life may be marked by labor obligations, seasonal demands, and the decisions of administrators whose names appear more often and more prominently on tablets. All 3 are human. All 3 live under the same sky. All 3 may honor the same gods, but the structure around them is not equal. This is how society turns difference into order. And when order is blessed by religion, difference becomes difficult to challenge. Priests occupied a complex place in this world. They were not all identical, and their roles varied across time and city. Some were ritual specialists. Some were administrators. Some performed purification. Some sang. Some interpreted omens. Some cared for divine statues. Some managed temple resources. In many cases, religious service required training, status, purity rules, or family connection. The priest did not merely believe in the sacred. The priest handled it. That gave priestly authority a special kind of force. A king might build a temple, but priests maintained the god's daily presence. A ruler might claim divine favor. But ritual experts knew the proper offerings, words, gestures, and timings. A city might depend on military strength, but it also depended on correct relations with its gods. What if the true elite bloodline was not royal, but ritual? This question shifts the focus. Kings are visible. Their names appear in inscriptions. Their victories are announced. Their monuments rise. But priestly and scribal continuity may be quieter and more durable. A dynasty can fall in battle. A city can be conquered. Yet ritual knowledge can survive by being copied, taught, adapted, and preserved in families and institutions. In a world where the gods must be served correctly, the keepers of correct service become indispensable. This helps explain why sacred hierarchy can outlast political collapse. When one ruler falls, the temple calendar still matters. When one city loses power, old hymns may still be copied. When one dynasty ends, scribes may serve another court. Knowledge flows through human vessels, and those vessels are often organized by family, training, and institutional loyalty. Here the concept of bloodline becomes less sensational but more historically meaningful. A bloodline can be a line of ritual access, a line of scribal education, a line of temple office, a line of royal marriage, a line of property control, a line of remembered names. No ancient tablet needs to announce a secret race for inheritance to shape destiny. The system itself does it. Yet there is a danger in reducing everything to class or politics. Ancient people did not necessarily experience temple life as cynical control. Many likely felt genuine devotion, fear, gratitude, awe, and dependence. The god was real to them. The ritual mattered. The city's survival depended on divine favor. The priest was not merely an official, and the offering was not merely taxation disguised as worship. Religion gave meaning to labor. It gave rhythm to time. It gave language to grief. It gave hope during plague, famine, war, and death. But precisely because it was meaningful, it could also sanctify inequality. This is one of the oldest contradictions in civilization. The same temple that gave people a cosmic home could also organize them into ranks. The same ritual that comforted the city could reinforce the authority of those allowed to perform it. The same god who protected the people could be invoked by elites to justify their place above the people. What ancient texts describe is sacred service to divine households. What archaeology reveals is a temple-centered economy with workers, offerings, offices, storage systems, and administrative records. What historians believe is that temples helped structure social hierarchy while also anchoring religious life. What modern interpretation suggests is that inherited temple and royal roles may have inspired later ideas of chosen bloodlines. The mystery is not that ancient society had elites. Every complex society develops them. The mystery is how early elites learned to clothe themselves in sacred necessity. A family did not merely hold an office, it served the god. A ruler did not merely collect wealth, he restored divine order. A scribe did not merely count grain, he preserved the city's memory. Power became holy by being useful to heaven, and once power becomes holy, inheritance becomes more than family advantage. It becomes continuity with the divine plan. This may be the hidden root of the bloodline myth. Not a single secret tablet, not 7 named genetic houses, but a world in which certain families stood near the sacred center for so long that their descendants could appear different from ordinary humanity. The temple created proximity. Proximity created privilege. Privilege created inheritance. Inheritance created myth. And myth created the feeling that some people were born closer to the gods. Yet the temple also guarded something more dangerous than wealth or status. It guarded symbols of transformation, descent, stripping, death, and return. In the rituals and stories of Mesopotamia, identity itself could be taken apart, piece by piece. until nothing remained but the mystery beneath the human mask. If sacred families controlled access to the gods in life, what did the myths say about the soul when every title, garment, and earthly privilege was removed? What happens to identity when every symbol of power is taken away? In one of the most unforgettable Mesopotamian myths, the goddess Inanna descends into the underworld. She is not a helpless figure wandering into darkness by accident. She is one of the most powerful divine personalities of the ancient world, associated with love, sexuality, conflict, kingship, desire, beauty, terror, and sovereign force. She enters the realm below with intention, adorned in signs of status, carrying the presence of heaven into the land where no one returns unchanged. But the underworld has rules. Even a goddess must obey them. At the first gate, something is removed. At the second gate, something else is taken. Then the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh. By the time Inanna reaches the deepest chamber, she has been stripped of the objects that marked her authority. Crown, ornaments, garments, and sacred powers are removed one by one. The descent is not simply movement downward. It is an unmaking. This is one of the most powerful sevenfold images in Mesopotamian literature. 7 gates stand between the world above and the world below. Each gate demands a surrender. Each threshold removes a layer. The goddess who entered in glory arrives exposed before Ereshkigal, queen of the underworld. What kind of ancient mind imagined divine descent as the stripping away of identities? This myth does not describe 7 bloodlines. It describes 7 boundaries. Yet those boundaries speak directly to the larger mystery of human division, because every human society builds identity out of visible signs: clothing, office, title, jewelry, crown, hairstyle, seal, staff, throne, temple roll, family name, and city affiliation all tell the world who a person is supposed to be. Inanna's descent asks a terrifying question. What remains when all of that is removed? Imagine the scene as a dark, cinematic journey. The goddess approaches the great gate of the underworld. Dust hangs in the air. The light of the upper world fades behind her. The gatekeeper stands before the entrance, not impressed by her beauty, not moved by her status, not afraid of her celestial authority. The law of the underworld is older than pride. She asks to enter. The gate opens. A symbol is taken. The sound echoes through the dark. At each gate, the same pattern repeats. Inanna questions the removal, and the answer is cold, ritual, unavoidable. The laws of the underworld must be obeyed. No one descends fully clothed in the identity of the living, not even a goddess. This is where the myth becomes psychological. The 7 gates can be read in many ways by modern interpreters. Some see ritual initiation. Some see a myth of death and return. Some see the movement of Venus as evening star and morning star. Since Inanna is later associated with the planet Venus in Mesopotamian astronomy and religion, some see the stripping of divine powers as a symbolic journey into vulnerability, loss, and transformation. These are interpretations, not one final certainty. What the ancient text describes is a divine descent, a confrontation with underworld authority, death-like suspension, and eventual return through divine assistance. What historians study is the myth's place in Sumerian religion, temple literature, goddess worship, and ancient concepts of death. What modern readers often feel is something intensely human, the terror of losing every identity the world gave us. The 7 gates matter because they reveal that ancient Mesopotamian thought did not only divide people in life, It also imagined a realm where earthly distinctions could be dismantled. The king, the priest, the worker, the singer, the warrior, the child, the widow, the foreigner, all eventually approach death. In death, the titles of the living world weaken. Could the underworld be the one place where bloodline loses its power? That possibility is unsettling. Ancient Mesopotamian afterlife beliefs were not usually centered on a bright paradise for the righteous. The underworld was often imagined as dim, dusty, restricted, and sorrowful. The dead depended on proper funerary care, offerings, memory, and family continuity. A person's condition after death could still be affected by social and ritual support. So even death did not entirely erase hierarchy. But Inanna's myth shows something deeper than funeral status. It shows that passage into the realm below requires surrender. The goddess cannot carry her full upper world identity into the underworld. Her powers do not exempt her. Her ornaments do not protect her. Her divine confidence does not prevent judgment. At the center of the descent stands Ereshkigal, a goddess often overshadowed in popular imagination, but absolutely essential to the mystery. She rules where others fear to go. She is not glamorous in the same way as Inanna. She is the authority of the hidden place, the sovereign of endings, the face of what cannot be negotiated. Ereshkigal represents a power no earthly hierarchy can defeat. The palace cannot bribe her. The temple cannot ignore her. The king cannot command her. The bloodline cannot escape her. This is why the 7 gates are so important to the mystery of division. They reverse the logic of status. In the living world, identity accumulates. A person gains title, wealth, ornaments, office, reputation, heirs, records, and memory. In the descent, identity is reduced. The self is not built upward, but stripped downward. 7 becomes not a ladder of privilege, but a path of removal. What if the ancient symbol of 7 was never only about groups, ranks, or sacred completeness, but about stages of exposure? The modern bloodline myth imagines hidden lines that preserve special power across generations. Inanna's descent imagines a sacred process in which even the greatest power must be surrendered at the gate. These two ideas clash in a fascinating way. One says identity is inherited and protected. The other says identity is temporary and must be relinquished. This tension may reveal something profound about Mesopotamian spirituality. The ancient world could sanctify hierarchy in the city, but its myths also knew that hierarchy had limits. A goddess can fall, a city can be destroyed, a king can die, a name can be erased, a temple can become a ruin, a sacred garment can be taken off. The underworld waits beneath all human arrangements. The 7 gates are therefore not merely mythic architecture. They are a warning. Everything that separates one person from another in life may be real, powerful, and socially enforced. Yet beneath it lies another reality where the soul is measured by forces older than status. But if the underworld strips away the signs of rank, why do some Mesopotamian texts place the Anunnaki there as judges of the dead? Can the heavens divide humanity before a child ever takes a first breath? In ancient Mesopotamia, the sky was not empty space. It was a vast field of signs: stars, planets, eclipses, storms, moon phases, unusual lights, and celestial patterns were watched with an attention that can feel almost impossible to modern people. The heavens were not only beautiful, they were readable. They could warn kings, trouble priests, guide rituals, and reveal whether the unseen powers were satisfied or disturbed. This does not mean Mesopotamians practiced astrology exactly as people understand it today in every period. The tradition developed over time, especially in Babylonian scholarship. But the basic idea was ancient and powerful events above could correspond to events below. The sky spoke, the learned watched, the king listened, and ordinary people lived beneath decisions shaped by signs they could not read for themselves. What if the oldest bloodline was not carried in veins, but written in the stars under which a person, city, or king appeared? Imagine the night over Babylon or Ur, long after the heat has left the walls. The desert horizon glows faintly. On a rooftop, a scholar watches the moon. He is not gazing for romance. He is measuring, comparing, remembering. A halo around the moon may matter. A planet's position may matter. An eclipse may matter enormously. The timing of a storm may matter. A strange color in the sky may send anxiety through the palace. A king may command armies, but he cannot command an eclipse. That is the power of celestial signs. They stand above the throne. They do not ask permission. They appear where everyone can see them, but only trained interpreters claim to understand what they mean. This created a special kind of hierarchy. The heavens were public. Their meaning was restricted. The stars belonged to everyone's eyes, but their interpretation belonged to experts. In Mesopotamian thought, the gods were associated with heavenly bodies. The moon, the sun, Venus, and other celestial powers carried divine significance. Nana or Sin was connected with the moon. Utu or Shamash was connected with the sun and justice. Inanna or Ishtar was associated with Venus, a radiant and unpredictable presence appearing as morning and evening star. The sky was therefore not a dead mechanism. It was a divine theater. To watch the heavens was to watch the movements of power. This changes how we understand sacred division. A city could belong to a god. A king could claim divine favor. A ritual could respond to danger. But the sky added another layer: cosmic timing. Not only who you were, but when something happened could matter. A birth, a coronation, a battle, a temple dedication, a journey, a death. All could be viewed within a web of signs. Time itself became unequal. Some moments were favorable. Some moments were dangerous. Some moments demanded ritual protection. Could a royal child born under a powerful sign be imagined as marked by heaven? Ancient Mesopotamian sources do show deep concern with omens surrounding kings and states. Celestial divination was especially tied to royal decision-making. Scholars compiled observations and interpretations, connecting heavenly events with possible earthly consequences. The focus was often the king, the land, enemies, harvest, disease, war, and political stability. This is important. The earliest sky omens were not always about the personal destiny of every individual in the modern horoscope sense. Much of the learned tradition focused on the fate of the kingdom. The king's body and the land's condition were linked. If the heavens showed danger, the threat could fall upon the ruler, the court, the city, or the nation. This means the king was not merely a man under the sky. He was a cosmic pressure point. If signs appeared above, his life might be at risk. Ritual experts might perform ceremonies to avert danger. In some later Mesopotamian practices, substitute king rituals could be used when omens threatened the true king. A temporary substitute might bear the danger symbolically, allowing the real ruler to survive. This practice reveals an astonishing idea. Fate could be redirected through ritual performance. What kind of society believes destiny can be transferred? The answer is a society where signs, bodies, offices, and rituals are bound together. The king's role is so sacred that danger aimed at the throne can be managed through symbolic replacement. This does not describe genetic bloodlines directly, but it shows that identity could be ritualized. A person could stand in for another. A title could carry danger. A body could become the target of cosmic meaning. Here, the modern mystery deepens. If kingship descends from heaven, and celestial signs warn the king, and scholars interpret those signs, then power depends on a triangle ruler, sky, and interpreter. The king may wear the crown, but the scholar reads the warning. The god may send the sign, but the ritual expert prescribes the response. The palace rules the land, but the heavens rule the palace. This is not a hidden bloodline system. It is a hidden dependency. The ruler depends on those who read the invisible order. Could the real division of humanity be between those who live under fate and those who claim to read it? This question carries enormous weight. In Mesopotamia, specialized knowledge of omens, rituals, calendars, and celestial patterns gave scholars unusual influence. They did not need to command armies to shape history. A warning delivered to the king could delay action, inspire ritual, alter policy, or intensify fear. A celestial event could become a political event because someone interpreted it. The stars became part of government. The night sky entered the throne room. The divine sign became administrative reality. Modern interpreters sometimes imagine the Anunnaki as beings connected to planets, star systems, or celestial origins. Such claims usually go far beyond the surviving ancient texts. What the texts clearly show is not a science fiction map of alien bloodlines, but a religious universe where celestial bodies carried divine meaning and earthly power responded to heavenly signs. That is mysterious enough, because it means ancient people did not think human destiny was sealed only in temples or palaces. They looked upward and saw a second archive, one no flood could easily wash away. The clay tablet could break. The wall inscription could crumble. But the stars returned night after night, silent and unburned, seeming to preserve a cosmic order older than any king. What ancient texts describe is a heaven filled with signs and divine associations. What historians believe is that Mesopotamian astrology and omen scholarship developed into a sophisticated system of state divination. What archaeology and tablet studies reveal is that trained scholars recorded celestial observations and connected them with royal and political concerns. What modern interpretation suggests is that the sky may have reinforced ideas of chosen rulers, sacred timing, and destiny attached to birth or office. The idea of 7 bloodlines gains a new symbolic layer here. 7 was associated in later ancient thought with visible wandering celestial bodies, the sun, moon, and 5 planets known to the ancient observers. In Mesopotamian religion, the heavens were tied to gods, omens, and cosmic order. A later mind could easily connect 7 heavenly powers with 7 human divisions, but the careful truth is more subtle. The sky did not divide people into 7 named biological lines in the surviving texts. It divided reality into readable and unreadable, favorable and dangerous, ordinary and ominous, royal and common, trained and untrained. It made time sacred. It made kings vulnerable. It made knowledge powerful, and perhaps that is the deeper secret. A person's blood could connect them to ancestors. A city could connect them to a god. A name could connect them to memory. But the sky connected all of them to a pattern no human hand could reach. If destiny could be read in the heavens, then who first learned to translate the language of the stars? And what did they choose not to tell the rest of humanity? What if the most powerful mark placed on humanity was not carved into flesh, but pressed into clay? Across ancient Mesopotamia, identity moved through seals, small cylinder seals, often made from stone, were rolled across wet clay to leave an image and sometimes an inscription. These impressions could close jars, secure doors, mark tablets, authenticate transactions, and identify people or institutions. A seal was small enough to hold in the hand, yet powerful enough to represent authority. In a world of temples, palaces, workers, rations, offerings, and land records, the seal became a symbol of control. It said, "This belongs." It said, "This is approved." It said, "This has been witnessed." It said, "This person or office stands behind the record." The modern mind often looks for secret bloodline marks in ancient stories, imagining symbols hidden on bodies or encoded in forgotten tablets. But Mesopotamia gives us a more tangible reality. People were marked through administration. Their labor was counted. Their grain was recorded. Their obligations were assigned. Their connection to temples and households could be fixed through writing, sealing, and storage. This was not a fantasy system. It was the daily architecture of civilization. Imagine a storeroom inside a temple complex. The walls are thick mud brick. The air smells of grain, wool, oil, clay, and reeds. Workers bring goods from fields and workshops. Officials check amounts. Scribes form tablets from wet clay. A seal is rolled across the surface. A pattern appears, a human figure before a god. Animals in motion. A banquet scene. A heroic struggle. A line of divine symbols. A name. A title. The impression hardens. The transaction becomes memory. The person becomes part of the system. Here, the mystery becomes startlingly physical. The same civilization that told myths of divine creation also created one of the earliest large-scale record-keeping worlds. The temple did not need invisible chains to organize people. It had tablets. It had seals. It had ration lists. It had supervisors. It had calendars. It had storerooms. It had sacred authority behind practical control. Could this be why the idea of divided humanity feels so ancient? Because once people are recorded differently, they begin to live differently. One name appears beside a high office. Another appears beside a ration. Another appears as a witness. Another appears as property. Another appears as a worker group. Another appears as the daughter of an elite house. Another appears only because something was owed. The tablet does not create every inequality, but it preserves it. And what is preserved begins to look permanent. The seal was especially powerful because it united image, ownership, and identity. Many seals show scenes that are not purely administrative. They carry religious imagery worshippers before gods, divine symbols, sacred animals, mythic beings, ritual gestures. This means a seal could operate in two worlds at once. It functioned as a practical tool, but it also carried a symbolic universe. Authority was not blank. It had a picture. It had a name. It had a sacred frame. A seal could belong to an individual, an official, or an institution. To use it was to act with recognized authority. Losing a seal could be serious. Controlling a seal meant controlling the ability to approve, certify, and bind. In the hands of an official, the seal was not decoration. It was a portable office. What if the true mark of the temple was the right to authorize reality? This is a different kind of division from royal blood or priestly birth. It separates those who are recorded from those who record, those who receive from those who distribute, those whose work is counted from those whose seal confirms the count. It reveals a society where power does not always shout. Sometimes it rolls quietly across wet clay. The mark appears, the clay hardens, the decision remains. Ancient temple economies were complex, and scholars continue to debate exactly how much land, labor, and production temples controlled in different periods and cities. It would be too simple to imagine every Mesopotamian person as directly owned by a temple. Households, palaces, private activity, local elites, merchants, and families also mattered. But temple institutions were undeniably central in many places and periods. Their records show organized labor, distributions of goods, offerings, craft production, and personnel tied to sacred households. This gives the bloodline mystery a grounded social form. People were divided by access to institutions. A child born into a family close to temple administration could inherit advantages that a field laborer's child could not easily reach. A family connected to sealing authority could participate in the management of goods and memory. A household whose name appeared in repeated transactions could accumulate visibility, trust, and influence. Over generations, administrative proximity could harden into status. The line between sacred duty and social privilege becomes difficult to see. A temple official might believe sincerely that he served the god. He might also benefit from being the one who controlled records. A scribe might believe he preserved truth. He might also preserve the system that gave him importance. A seal owner might see himself as responsible. Others might experience his authority as distance, dependency, or judgment. This is one of the oldest patterns in human civilization. Institutions begin as solutions to complexity. They coordinate food, labor, land, and ritual. But once institutions grow, they create gatekeepers. The gatekeeper may be necessary. The gatekeeper may also become powerful because others cannot pass without him. In Mesopotamia, the temple gate was literal and symbolic. Some people entered inner spaces. Some people stood in courtyards. Some people supplied offerings but never touched the divine statue. Some people were counted because the institution needed their labor. Some people counted others. The mark was not placed equally. It fell through rank. Modern interpretations often search for 7 divisions because 7 feels ancient, sacred, and complete. But the temple records reveal many divisions, not just 7. They reveal categories created by labor, gender, household, office, dependency, skill, and relationship to institutions. The number 7 belongs more strongly to mythic symbolism than to a known administrative classification of bloodlines. Yet the connection between myth and administration is important. A myth can say humanity was created to serve the gods. A temple record can show humans serving the god's household. A myth can say destiny is decreed. A sealed tablet can show a decision fixed in clay. A myth can say the world is ordered from above. An archive can show that order being enforced below. This is why the clay seal is so haunting. It is the place where invisible authority becomes visible. It is the moment when a human decision borrows the permanence of writing and the legitimacy of symbol. Once pressed, the seal says the matter is no longer fluid. It has taken form, like clay shaped into a tablet, like mud shaped into a brick, like a person shaped into a role. What ancient texts describe is a world where service to divine households matters. What archaeology reveals is an enormous record-keeping culture with seals, tablets, storerooms, and institutional control. What historians believe is that temples and palaces helped organize economic and social hierarchy. What modern interpretation suggests is that these systems may have inspired later ideas of marked groups, chosen families, or hidden lines of authority. The real mark of the temple was not a symbol on the skin. It was the impression of power on memory. Those who held seals could make decisions endure. Those whose names appeared under those decisions had their lives shaped by records they did not always control. and those who were never written at all passed through history like shadows at the edge of a torchlit courtyard. If humanity was divided by the marks of temple, palace, and archive, then the next mystery becomes even more dangerous. What happened when later Babylonian thinkers gathered these older fragments and transformed local memories into a grand cosmic story of human origin? What happens when a civilization inherits older myths and reshapes them into a larger cosmic design? Mesopotamia was not one frozen culture speaking with one voice forever. Its stories changed as cities rose, languages shifted, empires expanded, and scribes copied older traditions into new worlds. Sumerian myths did not simply vanish when Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian powers grew. They were absorbed, translated, reworked, reinterpreted, and placed into broader systems of theology and royal ideology. This is one of the most important truths in the entire mystery. The ancient material is layered. A name may be Sumerian in one setting and Akkadian in another. A god may carry one role in an early city tradition and a wider cosmic role in a later composition. A mythic theme may begin locally, then become imperial. A ritual may preserve an older memory while serving a newer political order. So when modern people speak of Sumerian texts as if they form one single secret book, they often miss the deeper reality. The tablets are not a hidden manual. They are fragments from many centuries of religious life, scribal teaching, temple tradition, political power, and mythic imagination. And the later Babylonian world becomes crucial because it shows how older ideas could be transformed into grander statements about creation, divine hierarchy, and human purpose. The Babylonian creation epic, often known as Enuma Elish, is a powerful example. It is not simply a Sumerian text, and it should not be treated as the oldest form of all Mesopotamian creation thought. It belongs to a later Babylonian theological world where Marduk rises to supreme status. The story describes a cosmic conflict, the defeat of the primordial sea goddess Tiamat, the ordering of the universe, and the creation of humanity from the blood of a defeated divine figure. Here, creation becomes political theology. The rise of a god mirrors the rise of a city. The order of heaven reflects the order of empire. Humanity is placed within a system where divine victory produces cosmic structure. This matters because it reveals how myths can be used to arrange memory. Older divine figures are not necessarily erased. They are repositioned. Local gods can become subordinate to a new supreme power. Ancient traditions can be gathered into a new hierarchy. A city's god can be elevated until the structure of the universe seems to point toward that city's importance. What if the transformation from Sumer to Babylon shows not a loss of ancient knowledge, but the method by which sacred power rewrites the past? Imagine a Babylonian festival. Priests recite sacred compositions. Statues of gods are honored. The city becomes a theater of cosmic order. Marduk's victory is not only remembered as a myth from long ago, it is renewed as a living claim. Babylon stands at the center because its god stands at the center. The people do not merely hear a story. They participate in a world arranged by that story. This is how myth becomes civilization's operating system. The same pattern appears in human hierarchy. A ruler does not only inherit land, he inherits narratives. He stands inside older traditions and reshapes them to support the present. A temple does not only store offerings, it stores memory. A scribe does not only copy, he selects, preserves, adapts, and sometimes subtly transforms. Every copied tablet is an act of survival. Every revision is an act of power. This creates a serious problem for anyone looking for a simple answer about the Anunnaki and 7 bloodlines. The Anunnaki themselves change across traditions. In some texts, they are great gods. In others, they are associated with the underworld. In later theological systems, divine groups can be reorganized beneath different supreme gods. Their identity is not one flat modern category. So when modern interpretations claim that the Sumerians said one fixed thing about the Anunnaki, caution is necessary. Which text? Which language? Which period? Which city? Which divine list? Which mythic context? Which later interpretation? The mystery grows not because the evidence is simple, but because it is complex. Babylonian and Assyrian scholars were heirs to deep traditions. They studied Sumerian even after it ceased to be a spoken everyday language, much as later cultures preserved sacred or scholarly languages long after ordinary speech changed. Sumerian became a language of learning, liturgy, prestige, and ancient authority. This means a later scribe copying Sumerian material was already looking backward into a past that felt venerable. The old language itself became sacred memory. Could this have helped create the feeling that ancient tablets contained hidden truths? Almost certainly. When a civilization preserves an older language in temples and schools, that language gains aura. Its signs become difficult, prestigious, and mysterious. Those trained to understand it become guardians of antiquity, to outsiders, and even to later generations inside the culture. The oldest words can seem to come from a time closer to the gods. This is where the idea of lost knowledge becomes powerful, not because every secret theory is true, but because ancient Mesopotamia really did preserve older layers of knowledge through scribal transmission. The danger is turning that fact into fantasy without evidence. The opportunity is recognizing something more fascinating. Myths were living systems. They did not sit unchanged on shelves. They traveled through time, absorbing new concerns. A story about divine labor could become a story about cosmic kingship. A local goddess could become part of a wider pantheon. A flood survivor could become a teacher of mortality. A divine assembly could be reorganized to reflect imperial order. From Sumer to Babylon, the question of human division becomes more cosmic. In the city-state world, divisions appear through cities, temples, offices, and local gods. In the imperial world, those divisions can be gathered beneath larger universal claims. The empire wants not just to rule land, but to explain why its rule fits the structure of heaven. This is why later mythology matters so much. It shows how human hierarchy can be projected onto the cosmos, and cosmic hierarchy can be reflected back onto humanity. The gods have ranks, cities have ranks, kings have ranks, priests have ranks, workers have ranks, even stories have ranks, because some versions become official while others fade into fragments. What ancient texts describe is not one secret doctrine of 7 human bloodlines. What historians see is a long process of mythic adaptation across Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian traditions. What archaeology reveals is continuity and change in cities, temples, tablets, rituals, and imperial power. What modern interpretation suggests is that later reorganizations of divine hierarchy may have inspired theories about hidden human hierarchies. The Babylonian transformation teaches a crucial lesson: myth is never only about the past, it is also about the present that retells it. Whoever retells the origin story gains influence over what humanity believes it is. If humans are created from divine blood, they are sacred servants. If kingship descends from heaven, rulers become cosmic necessities. If one god defeats chaos and organizes the universe, one city may claim to stand at the center of order. If older gods are rearranged beneath newer gods, then even divine memory can be governed. The bloodline mystery begins to look different from this angle. Perhaps the question is not whether a tablet secretly lists 7 ancient families. Perhaps the question is how often human beings have used sacred stories to decide who belongs near the center and who remains at the edge. Myth can liberate memory. Myth can also organize obedience. And when Babylon gathered older fragments into cosmic architecture, it revealed a frightening possibility. The story of human origins can be rewritten without appearing rewritten at all. But if divine hierarchy could be transformed by later scribes and empires, what happened to the Anunnaki when they were placed not only among the gods of heaven, but among the powers judging the dead below? Who judges humanity when the breath leaves the body? In some Mesopotamian traditions, the Anunnaki are not merely distant divine powers associated with heaven, creation, or cosmic authority. They can appear in connection with the underworld, the realm of the dead, where human ambition loses its voice and the hidden order beneath existence becomes unavoidable. This is one of the most unsettling shifts in their image. The beings modern imagination often places among the stars are also found in the depths, the same name that evokes ancient gods, divine assemblies, and mysterious power can lead into a world of dust, darkness, silence, and judgment. This matters because it changes the entire question of human division. If divine powers assign roles in life, what happens when those roles are stripped away in death? Does the king still stand above the worker? Does the priest retain sacred access? Does a royal bloodline matter in the land where all bodies become dust? Or does another court open beneath the earth, one that measures humanity by laws no living ruler can control? The Mesopotamian underworld was not usually imagined as a shining paradise. It was often described as a gloomy, restrictive place, a house from which those who enter do not return in the ordinary way. Dust and shadow dominate its imagery. The dead continue in a reduced condition. Their well-being can depend on burial, offerings, family remembrance, and proper ritual care. This creates a painful truth. Even death did not erase social ties completely. A person with descendants to make offerings could be remembered and sustained. A person without proper burial, without family care, or without ritual attention might face a more troubled condition. The living remained responsible for the dead, and the dead remained connected to the living through memory, food offerings, libations, and mourning practices. So the underworld was not simply equality. It was dependency continued in another form. Yet the presence of divine judges suggests that death was not only a family matter, it also belonged to cosmic order. The dead entered a realm ruled by powers greater than household memory. Ereshkigal, queen of the underworld, stands as one of its most formidable figures. Nergal appears in later traditions as a powerful underworld god. The Anunnaki, in some contexts, are associated with judgment in that realm, forming a divine court that confronts those who descend. What kind of judgment was this? It should not be confused too quickly with later systems of moral judgment, where souls are sent to heavenly reward or fiery punishment based on ethical conduct. Mesopotamian afterlife ideas were different, complex, and not always consistent across texts and periods. The underworld court may reflect ideas of order, authority, fate, and the fixed laws of the realm below more than a simple moral trial in the modern sense. But the image remains powerful. Human beings do not simply vanish. They pass into a domain where divine authority still waits. Imagine a burial in ancient Mesopotamia. Family members gather. The body is prepared. Offerings may be made. The name of the deceased matters. The tomb matters. The descendants matter. Food and drink for the dead are not merely sentimental gestures. They are part of the ongoing relationship between worlds. The living fear neglect. The dead fear being forgotten. In that moment, bloodline becomes painfully real, not as a secret genetic caste created by gods, but as the chain of care that links the living and the dead. A family line ensures offerings. A son may preserve the father's name. A household may maintain the ancestor's presence. A person cut off from family continuity faces the terror of abandonment beyond death. Here, lineage is not about ruling the world. It is about not being lost. This gives the bloodline mystery an entirely different emotional depth. Modern interpretations often imagine bloodline as power, privilege, hidden rulership, and divine inheritance. Ancient death traditions suggest another meaning: bloodline as memory, duty, and survival in the unseen realm. To have descendants was to have someone who might remember your name, feed your spirit, pour water, speak prayers, and keep you from dissolving into the silence of the forgotten. What if the oldest fear behind lineage was not domination, but disappearance? The Anunnaki in the underworld intensify this fear. They represent a divine presence beyond the reach of the living. In the city, a person might appeal to a patron, a priest, a ruler, or a family network. In the underworld, the rules are older and colder. The dead must face a realm where earthly negotiation weakens. The divine court is not impressed by wealth in the same way human society might be. Yet the dead person's condition may still depend on what the living do above. This creates a strange double vision. Death humbles human rank. Death also exposes the importance of family continuity. The king dies, but his tomb may be honored. The worker dies, but perhaps only a small household remembers. The child dies, and grief becomes a wound with no political meaning, only human devastation. The priest dies, and rituals he once performed must now be performed for him. Every role reverses. Every body becomes dependent. In this way, the underworld judges more than individuals. It judges the strength of human bonds. It asks whether a name will be carried. It asks whether the living will honor the dead. It asks whether identity can survive when breath, property, office, and voice are gone. The number 7 is not the central structure in every underworld reference to the Anunnaki, but the larger Mesopotamian pattern of sacred numbers, gates, courts, and divine groups feeds later interpretations. A modern reader searching for 7 bloodlines may see in the underworld a hidden tribunal assigning souls to categories. The actual ancient materials are more cautious. They show divine judgment, underworld order, and the continued importance of burial and remembrance, not a fixed list of 7 human lineages. Still, the symbolism is potent. 7 gates can strip identity. Divine judges can confront the dead. Family lines can preserve memory. Offerings can sustain what remains. Names can echo across generations. A person's fate is not isolated. It is bound to gods above, gods below, and humans still alive. This means Mesopotamian thought did not divide humanity only by city, temple, office, or kingship. It also divided people by their relationship to memory after death. Some were honored, some were neglected. Some became ancestors. Some became restless dead. Some had names that endured. Some became shadows beyond recovery. What ancient texts describe is an underworld governed by divine powers and strict laws. What archaeologists study are burial practices, grave goods, household tombs, and traces of ritual care. What historians believe is that Mesopotamian afterlife traditions emphasized family obligation, proper burial, and continuity between living and dead. What modern interpretation suggests is that divine judgment below may symbolize a deeper classification of human souls, though the evidence does not support a precise doctrine of 7 bloodlines. The underworld forces the mystery into its most intimate form. A bloodline is not only who rules, it is who remembers, it is who mourns, it is who speaks your name when you cannot speak it yourself. It is who keeps a small thread of identity from being swallowed by dust. Perhaps this is why ancient people cared so deeply about descendants, burial, ritual, and memory. They were not simply preserving family pride. They were resisting the second death, the death of being forgotten. Yet if the Anunnaki could appear among the powers below, then their mystery cannot be confined to creation, kingship, or heaven. They stand near the beginning of humanity, near the ordering of civilization, and near the silence after death. But one question becomes impossible to ignore. Why does the number 7 appear so often at the thresholds where human identity meets divine power? Why does the number 7 keep appearing where ordinary life touches the sacred? In Mesopotamian religion, 7 is not a simple code with one meaning. It is not a password that unlocks one hidden doctrine. It is not proof by itself of 7 biological bloodlines created by divine beings. But it appears often enough, and in powerful enough places, that it cannot be dismissed as coincidence without losing something important. 7 stands at boundaries. 7 appears near danger. 7 appears near completion. 7 appears near purification. 7 appears near supernatural force. 7 appears where human beings confront powers that cannot be fully controlled. This is why the number has haunted interpreters for centuries. It feels complete, but not peaceful. It suggests order, but also trial. It can mark sacred fullness, yet it can also mark a sequence of tests, gates, demons, rituals, or cosmic layers. In Mesopotamian thought, numbers could carry symbolic weight, and 7 became one of the most charged. What if 7 was never meant to divide humanity into families, but to describe the structure of passage itself? The 7 gates of the underworld are one unforgettable example. A being who passes through them does not simply move through space. Identity is reduced, status is challenged, power is taken. Each gate marks a threshold between what someone appears to be and what remains when that appearance is removed. The 7 sages offer another pattern. They are not bloodlines, but carriers of wisdom from a time placed near the lost beginning of civilization. Their number suggests completeness of transmitted knowledge, as if culture itself needed multiple channels to enter the human world. In magical and ritual texts, 7 can be associated with groups of supernatural forces, protective actions, repeated formulas, or dangerous beings. Sometimes 7 marks power that must be controlled. Sometimes it marks the completeness of a ritual response. Sometimes it marks a totality that surrounds the human person. This is where the mystery becomes subtle. 7 can organize fear. 7 can organize healing. 7 can organize memory. 7 can organize the unseen. Imagine an ancient healer or ritual specialist entering a house where a family believes invisible danger has crossed the threshold. Perhaps illness has come. Perhaps a child is feverish. Perhaps nightmares trouble the household. Perhaps an omen has frightened them. The specialist does not see the world as purely physical. The house may require words, gestures, offerings, purification, timing, and the correct invocation of divine powers. The danger must be named. The boundary must be restored. The hidden force must be driven out or redirected. In this world, number gives ritual form to anxiety. Repetition matters. Sequence matters. The correct count matters. A ritual done incorrectly may fail. A spoken formula with missing parts may lose force. A gate skipped in a myth would break the pattern. A series of 7 can make fear manageable by placing it inside sacred order. Could this be why 7 became so attractive to later mystery traditions? Because 7 gives shape to the unknown. The human mind is drawn to patterns. Ancient cultures were especially attentive to pattern because survival depended on reading cycles, river levels, seasons, moon phases, planting times, animal behavior, winds, storms, and celestial appearances. A repeated number in myth or ritual does not need to be a secret mathematical message to become meaningful. It can serve as a symbolic architecture. 7 can say the passage is complete. 7 can say the danger surrounds you. 7 can say the ritual has covered all directions. 7 can say the hidden order has been activated. This does not make 7 meaningless. It makes it richer than a single literal claim. Modern bloodline theories often work by gathering every ancient 7 into one system. 7 sages become 7 bloodlines. 7 gates become 7 levels of initiation. 7 planets become 7 divine genetic streams. 7 demons become 7 corruptions of mankind. 7 gods become 7 ruling houses. The pattern is seductive because it feels unified, but ancient evidence is more varied. The same number can appear in different contexts with different meanings. A ritual series is not the same as a genealogy. A mythic descent is not the same as a political office. A group of sages is not the same as a family tree. A celestial association is not the same as a biological division. The careful path does not destroy the mystery. It prevents the mystery from becoming a false certainty. What ancient texts describe is repeated use of 7 in sacred, ritual, mythological, and supernatural settings. What historians believe is that 7 often functions as a symbolic number of completeness, potency, or sacred ordering. What archaeology reveals is not a single 7-fold social caste system, but a broad civilization that used numbers, images, seals, rituals, and texts to structure meaning. What modern interpretations suggest is that these repeated patterns may point to hidden systems of human classification, though that claim remains speculative. The important question is why the speculation feels so compelling. Perhaps it is because human beings still fear being sorted by forces they cannot see. Modern people may no longer believe a temple archive assigns their destiny, but they know what it means to be categorized by nation, by class, by family, by wealth, by education, by blood type, by data, by algorithm, by inherited privilege, by documents, by names. Ancient 7-fold symbolism becomes a mirror. We look at 7 gates and think of stages of transformation. We look at 7 sages and think of lost knowledge. We look at 7 celestial bodies and think of cosmic influence. We look at 7 supernatural forces and think of hidden control. Then we ask whether humanity itself was divided according to some pattern we have forgotten. That question is modern, but the fear behind it is ancient. 7 often appears at points where human certainty breaks. Birth, death, sickness, kingship, divine knowledge, cosmic order, ritual danger, and the underworld. These are not ordinary categories. They are moments when people feel the limits of control. The number becomes a bridge between known life and unknown power. A farmer may not understand the logic of the stars. A grieving family may not understand the journey of the dead. A king may not understand why an eclipse appears. A mother may not understand why illness enters her house. A city may not understand why flood, war, or famine strikes. Ritual gives action. Myth gives story. Number gives structure. 7 becomes one way of saying that chaos has a pattern, even if the pattern is frightening. This may be the oldest reason the number survived so strongly. It gives the mind a handle on mystery. It turns invisible danger into a sequence. It turns sacred power into a form. It turns transformation into stages. It turns knowledge into a group. It turns the overwhelming into something that can be approached. But there is another side. Once a number becomes sacred, people can use it to organize authority. A priest can say the ritual requires 7 acts. A myth can say the descent requires 7 gates. A tradition can say wisdom came through 7 sages. A later interpreter can say humanity must therefore have 7 original lines. Each step adds meaning. Each step also risks reshaping the old material into something it never claimed. This is why 7 must be handled carefully. It may point to an ancient symbolic system. It may reflect ritual completeness. It may preserve patterns from oral tradition. It may connect myth, astronomy, magic, and theology. It may also tempt modern readers to see a hidden blueprint where the tablets give only scattered sacred patterns. The power of 7 lies precisely in that tension. It is clear enough to be noticed, but flexible enough to be reimagined. It belongs to the ancient world. Yet it continues to generate new myths in the modern one. So the question becomes sharper. Did Mesopotamians use 7 because they believed reality itself was structured in sacred layers? Or do modern people impose one secret system onto many different ancient uses? The answer may be both less sensational and more profound. 7 was a language of threshold. It marked places where humans crossed from ordinary life into ritual danger, divine knowledge, cosmic order, or death. It did not need to name 7 bloodlines to shape how later people imagined hidden divisions. It already carried the emotional force of separation and passage. 7 asks the listener to count, to wait, to pass step by step, to wonder what stands beyond the last gate. And perhaps that is why it became the perfect number for modern mystery. It feels like a locked structure with one missing key. It promises that behind scattered myths, there may be a pattern still unrevealed. But if 7 is a sacred code of passage, not a proven map of human blood, why do so many modern interpretations insist that the Anunnaki divided humanity into bloodlines at all? Why do modern people keep returning to the idea that the Anunnaki divided humanity into bloodlines? The answer begins with a strange absence. The ancient tablets do not give us the clean statement many people want. They do not clearly say that the Anunnaki divided mankind into 7 genetic families. They do not provide a secret chart of human lineages. They do not name 7 ruling bloodlines controlling history from the beginning. Those claims belong mostly to modern speculation, alternative history, occult reinterpretation, and Internet-era mythology built around fragments of Mesopotamian themes. And yet the idea refuses to disappear. Why? Because it feels like it explains something ancient, painful, and still alive human inequality. The world has always been divided. Some are born close to power. Some are born far from it. Some inherit names, property, education, titles, and protection. Others inherit debt, silence, labor, and vulnerability. Ancient civilization did not create this question, but it gave it temples, kings, records, myths, and divine language. So when modern interpreters encounter the Anunnaki, they see more than gods. They see an origin point for hierarchy. They see a possible answer to why some humans seem to rule while others serve. They see ancient stories of creation, divine blood, kingship from heaven, sacred cities, underworld judges, celestial signs, and sevenfold symbols. Then they connect the pieces into a hidden system. But connection is not the same as evidence. This distinction is essential. A pattern can be meaningful without proving a literal claim. 7 appears in Mesopotamian tradition. Divine beings do assign destinies in myth. Kingship is described as descending from heaven. Humans are created for labor in major creation traditions. Elite families did hold power. Priests and scribes did preserve specialized knowledge. Royal houses did claim divine favor. All of that is real within the historical and textual record. But the claim that the Anunnaki divided humanity into exactly 7 bloodlines is not directly established by the surviving Sumerian tablets. It is a modern construction built from ancient ingredients. Imagine someone entering a ruined temple at night with a lantern. On the floor lie broken fragments, a piece of a hymn to Inanna, a royal inscription, a seal impression, a ration tablet, a copy of a flood story, a later Babylonian creation myth, a list of divine names, an image of a protective sage. Each fragment is genuine. Each belongs to the ancient world. But if the visitor arranges them into a single picture, never drawn by the original scribes, the result may be fascinating, but it is not the same as the ancient record. This is how the modern bloodline myth works. It gathers real fragments. Then it fills the gaps with suspicion. That suspicion is powerful because the gaps are real. Thousands of tablets are broken. Many texts survive only in pieces. Many traditions changed over time. Entire libraries were lost. Archaeology continues to recover new evidence. But the ancient world will never be fully restored. The silence invites imagination. What if something was hidden? What if something was removed? What if priests knew more than they wrote? What if myths were symbolic masks for forbidden knowledge? These questions are not foolish by themselves. Ancient traditions often do preserve layers of meaning. Myths can encode social memory, ritual practice, environmental trauma, political ideology, and philosophical insight. But there is a difference between asking whether a myth carries hidden meaning and declaring that it proves a specific modern theory. The tablets must be allowed to remain ancient, not forced to become modern documentaries written in code. One reason the Anunnaki bloodline idea became so popular is that it transforms difficult historical processes into a dramatic story. Social hierarchy, state formation, priestly authority, royal ideology, and inherited privilege are complicated. They involve agriculture, labor control, warfare, trade, religious belief, climate pressure, family structures, language, law, and memory. A bloodline theory simplifies the maze. It says the world is divided because powerful beings divided it. It says elites rule because they descend from something non-human or divine. It says history is not chaotic but engineered. It says inequality is not merely human failure, but an ancient design. That story is frightening, but it is also strangely comforting. A hidden design feels less meaningless than random suffering. A secret origin feels more satisfying than thousands of years of messy human ambition. The idea of 7 bloodlines turns history into a puzzle with a concealed key. But ancient Mesopotamia offers a more unsettling possibility. No secret genetic program is required. Human beings learned to make hierarchy sacred on their own. They built temples and called them divine houses. They raised kings and said authority came from heaven. They trained scribes to preserve memory. They sealed tablets to control goods. They passed offices through families. They watched the stars to guide rulers. They buried the dead and depended on descendants for remembrance. They told stories in which gods made humans to work, judged them below, and assigned destinies beyond human appeal. That is already a profound mystery. It suggests that the human desire to turn power into destiny may be older than empire, older than philosophy, older than most written history. Modern bloodline mythology often places the source of division outside humanity. It says the Anunnaki did it. The ancient evidence may point to something harder to face humans, guided by their gods, fears, needs, and ambitions, built systems that made division feel eternal. This does not make the myths less important. It makes them more important, because myths reveal how people justify reality to themselves. A myth of divine labor explains why humans work. A myth of heavenly kingship explains why rulers command. A myth of sacred names explains why memory matters. A myth of underworld judgment explains why death does not free people from order. A sevenfold ritual structure explains why passage through danger feels patterned. The modern bloodline myth is another myth in that long chain. It reveals what modern people fear. We fear hidden elites. We fear inherited control. We fear that our lives are shaped by systems older than our choices. We fear that history has been arranged by powers we cannot name. We fear that freedom is smaller than we were told. That is why the Anunnaki remain so magnetic. They stand at the beginning of writing, surrounded by the oldest recorded questions about why humans exist and who has authority over them. They are ancient enough to feel like witnesses, distant enough to invite projection, fragmentary enough to become mirrors. But if we are honest, the strongest evidence does not show 7 biological bloodlines. It shows a civilization obsessed with order. Order in heaven, order in the city, order in the temple, order in labor, order in kingship, order in death, order in memory, and wherever order appears, division follows. The modern claim may be historically weak as a literal reading, but symbolically powerful as a reflection of something real. It expresses the suspicion that humanity has been sorted from the beginning into those who inherit command and those who inherit burden. The ancient tablets do not confirm that suspicion in the form modern theories imagine. They do something more haunting. They show us the moment when civilization began writing down the sacred logic of hierarchy. And if the 7 bloodlines are a modern myth built from ancient symbols, why does that myth feel so much like a memory we were never meant to recover? Why do so many ancient cultures claim that human beings descend from gods, ancestors, stars, clay, breath, or a forgotten age before catastrophe? The Mesopotamian stories do not stand alone in the ancient world. Around Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, Assyria, Egypt, Canaan, Anatolia, Persia, Greece, and beyond, people told origin stories that connected humanity to powers greater than ordinary life. Some traditions spoke of divine kings. Some described gods shaping humans from earth. Some imagined sacred ancestors. Some preserved flood memories. Some placed chosen families at the center of history. Some linked royal authority to heaven. This does not mean all ancient cultures secretly taught the same doctrine. It means early civilizations wrestled with the same terrifying questions. Where did humans come from? Why do rulers rule? Why do some families hold sacred power? Why do disasters destroy whole peoples? Why does memory reach backward toward a lost beginning? The mystery of bloodlines becomes larger when placed in this wider world. Not because every similarity proves a hidden global system, but because similarities reveal shared human concerns. Ancient people everywhere noticed that birth mattered. A child born to a king did not enter the world like a child born to a field laborer. A priestly family could preserve rituals unknown to others. A tribe could remember a founding ancestor. A city could claim a patron god. a nation could tell itself that its origin was chosen, protected, or tested by divine powers. Human identity was rarely imagined as purely individual. It was inherited through family, through land, through God, through language, through memory, through ritual, through the dead. This is where comparative mythology becomes useful, but also dangerous. It is useful because it shows patterns. It is dangerous because patterns can tempt people to force every culture into one story. A careful path must ask what each tradition actually says, what the historical context supports, and where modern interpretation begins adding new connections. Take Egypt. Egyptian kingship developed its own sacred language, very different from Mesopotamian city-state traditions. The pharaoh could be described in divine terms and linked with gods such as Horus and Ra. Royal blood, ritual office, cosmic order, and divine legitimacy were woven together. The Egyptian king upheld Ma'at, the principle of order, balance, and truth. The king's body, name, burial, and lineage carried cosmic significance. This resembles Mesopotamia. In one broad sense, rule is not merely political. It is sacred, but Egypt is not Sumer. Its theology, geography, funerary traditions, royal ideology, and artistic symbols have their own logic. The Nile's rhythms shaped Egyptian imagination differently from the unpredictable river systems of southern Mesopotamia. Egyptian afterlife expectations also developed in ways that differ sharply from the dim Mesopotamian underworld. Similarity does not erase difference. Yet the emotional pattern is recognizable. Power seeks heaven. Kings want the universe to appear on their side. Canaanite and later Hebrew traditions also contain stories of divine creation, sacred ancestry, flood, chosen lineage, covenant, and descent. Some later biblical traditions remember humanity shaped from earth and animated by divine breath. Genealogies become enormously important. Family lines carry promises, curses, blessings, land claims, and identity. The flood resets human history through a surviving household. Ancestors become vessels of sacred memory. Again, this is not the same as a Sumerian 7-bloodline doctrine, but it shows how ancient societies used ancestry to explain destiny. Who you descend from matters because it tells you where you stand in the story. This is a powerful idea. A genealogy is not only a record of births, it is a map of meaning. It says you belong here, not there. You inherit this promise, this burden, this land, this God, this memory, this wound. A genealogy can connect the living to the beginning of the world. It can also separate one group from another with sacred force. Could the modern bloodline myth be a distorted echo of ancient genealogical thinking? Very possibly. Ancient Persia offers another angle. Iranian traditions developed rich ideas of cosmic struggle, order against chaos, truth against the lie, sacred kingship, and world ages. These traditions are not Mesopotamian, but they existed in overlapping historical worlds where cultures encountered, influenced, resisted, and reimagined one another. The ancient Near East was not sealed into isolated boxes. Ideas moved through trade, conquest, exile, translation, diplomacy, migration, and scribal exchange. Myths traveled, names changed, gods were compared. Stories were adapted. Symbols crossed borders. But a traveling symbol does not always carry the same meaning when it arrives. This is why the bloodline mystery must be handled carefully. A modern interpreter may see divine kings in Egypt, flood survivors in Mesopotamia, sacred genealogies in Hebrew tradition, heroic demigods in Greece, and cosmic ages in Persia. Then declare that all preserve one hidden history of divided divine blood. That conclusion goes beyond the evidence. The stronger conclusion is more subtle. Ancient cultures repeatedly use descent to explain difference. Descent from gods, descent from ancestors, descent from flood survivors, descent from royal houses, descent from chosen families, descent from those who preserved knowledge. This pattern matters because it reveals that human beings have long explained inequality by telling stories about origin. A family is not powerful merely because it has weapons. It is powerful because it descends from someone. A king is not legitimate merely because he sits on a throne. He is legitimate because his name, body, ancestor, god, or city connects him to sacred time. The past becomes a weapon. Memory becomes authority. Origin becomes law. Greek traditions later offer their own vivid form of divine ancestry. Heroes could descend from gods and mortals. Cities traced themselves to legendary founders. Noble families could claim heroic connections. Myth became a way of elevating political and social identity into sacred narrative. A hero's blood could explain greatness, danger, suffering, or exceptional destiny. Here again, the pattern is not identical to Mesopotamia, but the psychological structure is familiar. Some people are imagined as carrying more than ordinary human inheritance. That thought has never fully left civilization. Even modern societies, while often rejecting divine blood in official language, still preserve inherited status in new forms. Family names open doors. Wealth travels through generations. Education reproduces advantage. Political dynasties emerge. Religious authority passes through institutions. Nations tell origin stories. People search ancestry records, hoping to discover identity in blood. The ancient obsession remains alive beneath modern clothing. This is why the idea of 7 Anunnaki bloodlines continues to attract attention. It condenses many old patterns into one dramatic image: divine beings, human origin, hidden hierarchy, sacred number, lost knowledge, inherited power, a divided species. It feels ancient because it is built from ancient emotional materials, even when the specific claim is modern. What ancient texts describe across cultures are many different myths of creation: ancestry, kingship, divine favor, catastrophe, and sacred memory. What archaeologists know is that early civilizations developed real hierarchies connected to land: temples, palaces, writing, burial, and inherited roles. What historians believe is that origin stories often helped communities explain identity, authority, and social order. What modern interpretation suggests is that these repeated motifs may point toward a shared human memory of hidden division, though that remains speculative. The most important clue may be this: humans do not only inherit biology, they inherit stories, and stories can divide people more powerfully than blood. A child raised inside a chosen lineage story walks differently through the world than a child told they belong to the forgotten. A ruler taught that heaven chose his house may govern with a certainty no law can easily restrain. A people who believe their ancestors survived divine catastrophe may carry both pride and fear. Blood carries life. Story tells life what it means. Perhaps this is why ancient bloodline myths are so enduring. They give flesh to invisible inheritance. They make social memory feel natural. They turn power into ancestry and ancestry into destiny. They tell people that the divisions they see around them are not recent accidents, but echoes of the beginning. But what if the strongest bloodline is not biological at all? What if the real inheritance passed from the ancient world into the modern one is the belief that some humans are born closer to the sacred story than others? What if the most important clue is not what the tablets say, but what they never say? The claim that the Anunnaki divided humanity into 7 bloodlines sounds powerful because it feels ancient. It sounds like something carved into clay, hidden in a temple archive, guarded by priests, and rediscovered only after thousands of years. It carries the atmosphere of secrets gods, creation, forbidden knowledge, blood, lineage, cosmic order, and a number that appears again and again in sacred traditions. But when the actual evidence is approached carefully, a silence appears. There is no surviving Sumerian tablet that plainly states this doctrine. No known ancient list names 7 Anunnaki bloodlines of humanity. No established translation presents a hidden genetic division of mankind into 7 divine families. No archaeological discovery confirms a biological program carried out by the Anunnaki. That silence does not make the ancient world less mysterious. It makes it more demanding. Because now the question changes. Why do people feel so certain that the tablets must be hiding what they do not actually say? This is where the mystery becomes less about ancient Mesopotamia alone and more about the human mind searching through ruins. A broken tablet invites completion. A missing line invites imagination. A damaged myth invites reconstruction. A divine name whose meaning shifts across centuries invites projection. The ancient past is full of gaps, and gaps are dangerous places. They can hold humility, but they can also become homes for certainty without evidence. Picture an excavation trench under a white desert sky. A fragment of clay emerges from the soil. It is not a shining golden artifact. It is small, cracked, ordinary-looking, almost disappointing to anyone expecting treasure. But on its surface are signs pressed by a human hand thousands of years ago. A scholar cleans it, studies it, compares it with known signs, looks for duplicates, checks grammar, context, period, and parallels. Perhaps the fragment belongs to an administrative account, perhaps a hymn, perhaps a school exercise, perhaps a myth. The fragment speaks, but it does not speak everything. Most of the ancient world is missing. Whole libraries burned or crumbled. Tablets broke. Oral traditions vanished. Local rituals were never written down. Meanings changed. Scribes copied selectively. Later generations misunderstood older texts. Modern readers bring their own desires. Every reconstruction stands over an abyss. This is why honesty matters. What ancient texts describe is not a simple modern bloodline theory. They describe gods, creation, labor, cities, kingship, divine decrees, the underworld, rituals, sacred numbers, flood survival, and cosmic order. These themes are real. They are powerful. They belong to the Mesopotamian imagination. What archaeology reveals is not a secret genetic caste system. It reveals cities, temples, palaces, graves, tablets, seals, workshops, walls, canals, household spaces, administrative systems, and evidence of hierarchy. It shows human beings organizing labor, worship, authority, property, and memory at a scale the world had rarely seen before. What historians generally believe is that myth and institution shaped each other. Stories gave meaning to social order. Temples and palaces gave structure to religious life. Kings used divine language to justify rule. Scribes preserved traditions that reflected both belief and power. Myths were not random fantasies, but neither were they coded scientific reports. What modern speculation suggests is that scattered symbols may conceal a deeper hidden system of human origin. This possibility attracts attention, but it remains interpretation, not established fact. The silence of the tablets forces a choice. Do we listen to the ancient voices as they are, strange and incomplete, or do we make them say what modern mystery wants them to say? This does not mean speculation has no place. Speculation can open questions. It can notice patterns. It can challenge lazy assumptions. It can ask why certain symbols recur, why elites claim divine ancestry, why myths preserve memories of catastrophe, why 7 appears at thresholds of transformation. But speculation becomes dangerous when it disguises itself as translation. A translation must answer to the signs. A theory must answer to the evidence. A mystery must not become a lie just because the lie is exciting. The actual ancient material is already filled with wonder. It does not need to be forced into a false certainty. The Sumerians and their Mesopotamian heirs imagined humans as creatures made for service, shaped by divine decisions, bound to cities, dependent on temples, watched by stars, named into memory, humbled by death, and surrounded by powers above and below. That is not ordinary. That is one of the most profound religious worlds humanity ever recorded. But it is also not the same as modern claims about 7 engineered bloodlines. The difference matters because the past deserves protection from our hunger for spectacle. There is a temptation in every age to treat ancient people as either primitive fools or keepers of perfect hidden knowledge. Both are mistakes. They were neither simple nor all-knowing. They were human beings living inside a symbolic universe of astonishing depth. They built cities, feared gods, mourned children, counted grain, praised kings, cursed enemies, watched the moon, buried ancestors, and asked why existence had been arranged the way it was. Their myths were not empty. Their myths were not modern science. Their myths were not internet theories waiting to be decoded. They were sacred stories through which people tried to survive the terror of being human. This is where the silence becomes meaningful. The tablets do not say 7 bloodlines, but they do reveal a culture intensely concerned with classification, heaven and earth, God and human, king and subject, city and wilderness, temple and outer world, living and dead, named and forgotten, pure and impure, favored and abandoned, before the flood and after the flood. Division is everywhere, but it is not always blood. It is place. It is office. It is ritual. It is memory. It is knowledge. It is divine favor. It is access. It is the power to be counted and the vulnerability of being erased. Perhaps the modern bloodline theory survives because it transforms all these divisions into one dramatic symbol. Blood becomes a container for every inherited inequality. 7 becomes a container for every sacred pattern. The Anunnaki become a container for every unexplained authority standing above mankind. The theory may be historically unsupported as a literal doctrine, but it functions like a modern myth about ancient power. And that modern myth reveals something uncomfortable about us. We still suspect that the world is organized by hidden inheritance. We still see families, institutions, nations, corporations, dynasties, priesthoods, and elite networks passing power through time. We still wonder whether freedom is real when so many paths are shaped before birth. We still feel that invisible systems place people into roles long before they understand the rules. So we look backward to the first writers and ask them to explain us. We ask the tablets why humanity is divided. We ask the gods why some rule. We ask the flood why some survive. We ask the stars why some are chosen. We ask the underworld whether rank survives death. And when the tablets remain silent on our exact question, we sometimes fill the silence with the answer we fear most: that we were divided on purpose. But the stronger ancient lesson may be different. Mesopotamian texts show that people have always lived between destiny and invention. They inherited gods, cities, names, roles, and obligations, yet they also built, interpreted, adapted, resisted, remembered, and rewrote. Civilization was not simply imposed from above. It was created through human hands, then explained through divine stories. This makes the mystery deeper, not smaller. If no tablet proves 7 bloodlines, then the division of humanity cannot be blamed so easily on one hidden act of the gods. It may have emerged through the slow, sacred machinery of civilization itself. Labor organized into classes. Ritual guarded by specialists. Power inherited through families. Kingship wrapped in heaven. Memory preserved for the few and denied to the many. The silence of the tablets leaves us with a harder question than any secret doctrine. Not which bloodline do we belong to, but who taught us to believe that some lives are written closer to heaven than others. Why was humanity divided? That is the question hiding beneath every tablet, every temple wall, every royal name, every flood story, every sacred number, every underworld gate, and every modern theory that tries to turn the Anunnaki into architects of human blood. It is not only a question about ancient Mesopotamia, it is a question about civilization itself. Because once human beings began living in cities, difference became unavoidable. Someone planned canals, someone dug them, someone stored grain, someone guarded it, someone wrote the tablet, someone received the ration, someone entered the temple, someone remained outside, someone wore the crown, someone carried the bricks. The mystery is not simply that society became divided. The mystery is that ancient people so often explained those divisions through heaven. In the world of Sumer and its Mesopotamian heirs, human life was placed inside a sacred order. Gods owned cities. Temples stood as divine houses. Kingship could descend from heaven. Names preserved destiny. Writing fixed obligations. Seals authenticated authority. Ritual specialists guarded dangerous knowledge. The dead depended on descendants. The stars could warn the palace. The underworld waited beneath every title. This was not a world where humans imagined themselves as free-floating individuals. A person belonged to a household, a city, a god, an office, a family, a social rank, a memory system, and a cosmic order older than personal choice. So when modern voices say the Anunnaki divided humanity into 7 bloodlines, they are often trying to give one dramatic answer to a much older and more complicated mystery. The surviving ancient texts do not confirm that exact claim. They do not give a clear doctrine of 7 engineered human families. They do not present a known list of Anunnaki bloodlines. They do not prove that human inequality began as a biological program created by divine beings. But they do reveal something almost as unsettling. They reveal one of humanity's earliest written attempts to explain why people have different places in the world. In creation myths, humans are made to carry divine labor. In flood stories, survival depends on warning, obedience, and selection. In royal traditions, kingship is not merely invented by human ambition, it comes from above. In temple archives, people are counted, categorized, fed, employed, obligated, and remembered through clay. In myths of descent, even divine power can be stripped at the gates of death. In traditions of sages, knowledge comes from a vanished age and must be preserved by chosen keepers. This is not a simple bloodline chart. It is a civilization thinking in layers. Layer of clay, layer of blood, layer of name, layer of city, layer of temple, layer of kingship, layer of death, layer of memory, layer of heaven, layer of silence. The number 7 moves through this world like a ritual shadow. 7 gates, 7 sages, 7-fold patterns of sacred danger and completion. 7 does not prove a literal human division by itself, but it tells us something important about how ancient minds approached mystery. They counted thresholds. They gave form to fear. They imagined passage in stages. They saw the unseen not as random, but as structured. That may be why 7 became so powerful in modern interpretations. It feels like a hidden architecture. It feels like a key. It feels like the shape of a secret that almost reveals itself, then disappears. But the deeper truth may be more difficult than the theory. Humanity may not have been divided once. Humanity may have divided itself again and again, then called those divisions sacred. A ruler claims divine favor, and a dynasty is born. A priestly family guards ritual, and access becomes inheritance. A scribe records names, and memory becomes unequal. A temple manages labor, and service becomes destiny. A city claims a god, and geography becomes identity. A survivor crosses the flood, and ancestry becomes sacred. A name is preserved, and one life endures while another vanishes. This is how division becomes ancient, not always through violence in a single moment, but through repetition, through ritual, through story, through administration, through fear, through gratitude, through the need for order in a dangerous world. And yet the ancient texts do not simply glorify hierarchy. They also expose its fragility. Cities chosen by gods fall into ruin. Kings who claim heaven die. Temples collapse. Names are broken. Tablets are buried. Bloodlines forget themselves. Goddesses descend and are stripped of power. The dead wait in dust. The flood washes away the noise of mankind. The same civilization that made authority sacred also knew that no earthly order lasts forever. This is where the mystery returns to its beginning. The Anunnaki remain powerful in the imagination because they stand at the edge of the first written questions. Who made humanity? Why do we work? Why do some rule? Why do others serve? Why does knowledge belong to a few? Why does death humble everyone? Why do sacred numbers appear at the gates of transformation? Why do people still feel that their lives are shaped before they understand the rules? The ancient scribes did not give us the modern answer of 7 bloodlines. They gave us something older. They gave us a mirror. In that mirror, we see a world where gods determine destiny, but humans build the institutions that enforce it. We see clay tablets that speak of divine order, but also record very human systems of labor, privilege, memory, and control. We see myths that reach toward heaven, but also shadows of earthly inequality beneath them. Perhaps the most haunting possibility is not that a secret tablet is missing. Perhaps the most haunting possibility is that no secret tablet is needed. The division of humanity may have been preserved in plain sight in the temple gate, in the royal name, in the ration list, in the burial offering, in the school of scribes, in the myth of creation, in the story of the flood, in the claim that power descends from heaven. Whether the idea of 7 Anunnaki bloodlines is a modern myth, a symbolic interpretation, or a distorted echo of ancient sacred hierarchy, it continues to survive because it touches a fear that has never left us. That some people are born into stories of command, that others are born into stories of burden, that the world may have been arranged long before we arrived. And perhaps the final question is not whether the Anunnaki divided humanity into 7 bloodlines. Perhaps the final question is why humanity has always been so willing to believe that division came from the gods.